What's up, everyone? How are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was left in the Rain Village and trained by Pain himself? If you enjoy, then please like, share, and do comments. A droplet of rain falls from above, leaving its home in the sky on the journey to Earth. It succumbs to the wonders of gravity, descending from its heavenly bed. A small ray of sunlight shines through, revealing the entire spectrum of wonder inside this tiny grain of water. But the droplet knows none of its potential. It sees only the path ahead, without truly knowing where it is going or why. The time in which it takes from the start of this raindrop's life to the end can only be described as ephemeral. And as if to follow such a name, this raindrop serves a purpose like none of its brethren ever have. It plummets through the air, the first thing coming into sight the gray rocks of the land. But then as it draws nearer, its destination appears to be an odd black shape that lies on the ground beneath it. But that is a false belief as well, as the raindrop's view is filled with a round orange shape with a dark hole to one side. It is that hole which the raindrop falls through, breaking on a strange combination of white, red, and black. That strange symbol which the colors formed, it was nothing like the raindrop had ever seen. But that enigmatic symbol, whatever it was, reacts violently to Ephemeral's touch. A huge set of jaws swallows dear Ephemeral up before chewing on the poor thing furiously until the short-lived beauty was no more. "What do you intend to do now?" asked Uchiha Madara without the Jido Mazo. He raised his head, the most movement he could manage due to the black rods impaled through his arms and legs. He looked at the person standing before him, a man with long orange hair that fell down his back. This man had a heavily pierced face, with black objects just like the rods piercing the defeated Uchiha before him. The man looked down at Madara with impassive eyes, eyes which were gray, with several black circles surrounding the pupil. The man reached forward, a hand procuring from his black cloak, the red clouds appearing to billow with his movement. The hand was placed atop the rod that pierced Madara's right leg. He gripped it and twisted, forcing Madara to cringe in pain. "If I cannot have the weapon," the man said with no signs of remorse for Madara's suffering, "then I simply need disciples." "Disciples?" Madara repeated, letting out a dry laugh, the only dry thing in this place. "You will build an army. How do you expect to gain that many followers?" "Man is attracted to power." The man replied, "The power to inflict pain upon his enemies. I need simply bring those beings of power to stand by my side and others will follow." "The Jinchuriki? Ha! You think you can control them. You may know pain, but you do not know their pain. They will never follow you. It is that pain that ensures they will follow me. I will offer them a release from that pain, and give them the peace they so desire if that is what they wish." Madara chuckled cruelly, looking at the man before him as if he was a child. "Can't you see?" he asked. "Peace is but an illusion. Casting that illusion only stops conflict, but it cannot stop people from feeling hatred." The man released the rod, moving slowly around Madara until he was standing at the Uchiha's head. "Total peace is not my goal," he said. "Without pain, peace can never be understood. As such, I will show the world that pain, my pain." The man then reached out again, placing his hand this time upon Madara's head. "You have experienced much pain in this world, Uchiha Madara," the man said, gripping Madara's head. "Now find peace." With that, he pulled his hand away, and the light faded from Madara's eyes as his soul was removed from his body. The man removed Madara's mask, tossing it aside. He then studied the Uchiha's dead face contemplatively, as if considering something about the ancient man. "No," he said before turning and walking away. The trees passed in a blur, the leaves melding together into one long line. The dark night sky gave the forest an ominous look. Every shadow looked like an enemy, but they also seemed to be the safest place, like such an embrace could save from other pain. The forest was silent. The creatures of the trees watched in interest at the spectacle before them. It wasn't because of speed that the trees were but a blur. It was the eyes of the person seeing them, tears obscuring the vision. For in truth, this person was never fast enough for the world to seem that way otherwise. But this child was too blinded by fear to even notice this trivial point. He landed on a bough, his hands and feet touching the wood as he moved on all fours. He then kicked off again, moving in such an animalistic way, he really seemed like a tormented pup being chased by a wolf. "Come on, Naruto-kun, you know running is pointless." Naruto did his best to ignore the voice echoing through the trees. But it wasn't easy, that person was really getting to him. "Uruka-kun won't be able to protect you anymore." "Shut up," Naruto cried, his tears falling down his face. Get away from me. Get away from me? Ha ha, how pathetic. Eh? Naruto grabbed onto an overhead branch, using it to swing around and change his direction. But the voice followed him still, that cruel laugh coming from every direction. Come on, little fox, can't you see you're trapped? The voice asked. Naruto squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the sound of the voice. But he forced them open again. It was stupid to run with your eyes closed. He prayed for his escape to get away from the person tracking him. He leapt down to the ground, hoping to find a tree to hide behind. He ran to the largest one he could see and hid among the roots, curling into a ball. He held in his arms Konoha's scroll of sealing, which he had stolen just recently. He had been promised that if he could do that and learn one of the jutsus within the scroll, he'd be granted the rank of genin. But the person who had told him so, Mizuki, had lied. He tricked Naruto into stealing the scroll for him and intended on taking it for himself. Naruto's sensei, Yumino Uruka, had fought to protect Naruto and had ordered him to run. But here Mizuki was, chasing him once more. Did that mean he'd killed Uruka? The thought terrified Naruto to his heart. If Uruka really had died. Do you wish for assistance? Naruto froze. That voice, it didn't belong to Mizuki or even Uruka. It was a voice Naruto had never heard before, completely unfamiliar to him. It also sounded close, like it was literally right next to him. Naruto's eyes whipped around, trying to catch the person who had spoken in his gaze. But there was no one around, not that he could see. Who is that? Naruto asked quietly in case Mizuki heard. If you like, we can save you from this man. However, we won't do so for free. In exchange for your life, you will come with us. Do you accept? Naruto's eyes widened. There were two of them. He felt incredibly uneasy about these two disembodied voices, but he couldn't have felt less safe than he already did. However, he couldn't bring himself to trust these voices either. They could easily. Naruto, where are you? Mizuki's voice rang out. Okay, I accept. Naruto cried, curling into a tighter ball. The voices didn't reply, but he heard what sounded like a low scraping, like wood rubbing against wood. It came from behind him, but when Naruto looked, he saw nothing, just the tree that stood behind him. Come out, Naruto-kun. Mizuki's voice called goadingly, don't make me grah. Naruto flinched at the cry. Mizuki had been getting progressively closer as he said that any longer and Naruto would have probably been found. But he didn't let his guard down. He still felt a great sense of fear, maybe even more so after that scream. But after a moment, there was only silence. Carefully, he raised his head, looking around worriedly. It seemed like Mizuki was gone. There were no signs of him. So then those people must have. It is done. Naruto spun round, his eyes widening in terror. Where there had once been nothing, there was a man actually extending out of the tree. Naruto pulled himself back with his hand. This didn't look like man, more like a monster. Half of his body was pale white, while the other completely black. His eyes were a yellow color, staring down impassively at Naruto. His short hair was also a grayed shade of green, which was a color of hair Naruto had never seen before. He was surrounded by a strange sort of plant. It looked like he was lying inside two jagged leaves, only his upper torso visible through it. The man looked down at Naruto expectantly, before moving further out of the tree. As he did that, the wood seemed to cling to him, as if he had actually been a part of the tree before but was tearing himself free of it. As he moved, Naruto noticed the strange clothes he was wearing. He had a black cloak on with a very wide color to accommodate the strange leaves around him. The cloak had a red line running down its middle where there were also strange red clouds. The man finally stepped out from the tree, standing before the cowering Naruto. It is done. The man said, your pursuer is dead. As if to prove this point, he dragged something forward with his arm and dropped it in front of Naruto, who looked down at it, petrified. It was the body of Mizuki, with a long slash across his throat. Mizuki stared up at Naruto with dead eyes, as if surprised by his predicament. Naruto stared at the face before looking up at the man with equal terror. Now that we have fulfilled our end of the bargain, you will keep yours. The man said, but in the voice of the other. This man was both of them. This guy, Naruto thought as he crawled back some more, holding the scroll in front of him for protection. He's insane. You have no need to fear us, child. The man said in the first voice before changing back to the second. If we meant you any harm, then we would have left you to this person. Naruto gulped down hard. This person or persons had a point. There would have been no reason to kill Mizuki if they were going to kill him as well. But he still felt uneasy, something which was clear on his face. The man took a step forward, leaning close to see Naruto's face. "You had better not be thinking of breaking your word. You cannot escape us," he said. But then the white side looked to the black reproachfully, and that one fell silent. He then looked down at Naruto, who had become even more frightened by his words. "I apologize for that. It was unnecessary for him to say such things." Naruto stared up at the man. He was beyond insane. "Let me ask you something." The man said, "Are you lonely, child?" Naruto's expression shifted from fear to surprise. How could he know that? The man nodded at the change of attitude before smiling warmly. "When you are alone, the only person you have is yourself. But it is our wish to take you somewhere where there are others like yourself." He said, "Lonely and very unique people exactly like yourself." "People like me?" Naruto repeated with a dazed look. He thought about what Mizuki had told him about the Kyuubi being sealed inside him. Was it really possible that there were others out there who were the same? It couldn't be, it was impossible. Naruto reached up to his jacket, squeezing the fabric at his chest tight. There couldn't be anyone like him. He was a monster, wasn't he? "You are aware of what is inside you," the man said gently. "You are not the only one with a Biju sealed within you." Naruto looked up again, his brow creasing in confusion. "A Biju? What was that?" "You possess the Kyuubi," the man said, picking up on Naruto's thoughts. "That is but one of 9 Biju in this land. There are 8 others like yourself who live in the same fear and sorrow that you do. If you'll let us, we would like you to meet them." Naruto blinked slowly, staring the man in his left eye, the side that seemed to be kind. 8 others like him, it almost sounded too good to be true. But in that case, was it? "For what reason should you remain here?" the black side asked, speaking up again. "From what I heard, this place holds no happiness for you." Naruto looked down again. This man was right. With Uruka gone, what reason did he have to stay there? Sure, there was Shikamaru and the others, but they were genin now. They would soon be going out on missions, and Naruto would be left behind, forgotten. That was the last thing he wanted, but it didn't look like there was anything he could do about it. "Other people like me," he repeated before slowly looking up at the man. "Can you really take me to them?" "Of course," the man replied, smiling again. He straightened up and grabbed the body of Mizuki, hauling it over his shoulder. "Come with us, we have to leave." "You're taking him?" Naruto asked, looking at Mizuki uneasily. "We cannot allow any traces that we were here." The black side replied before changing again. "I'm sorry, but he will have to come with us at least until we can dispose of him." Naruto looked up at the man, then to Mizuki. He was still undecided. He just didn't feel right about this. He looked to his right. Konoha was just over there. If he could get away, would he be able to find one of the guards in time? "I wonder, are you afraid of us because we look like a monster?" Naruto's eyes widened and his mouth hung open. "A monster? Stay away from him. We're not supposed to come near you." "Freak." Naruto lowered his gaze, closing his mouth. A monster, that was what everyone thought of him in there, and no matter what he tried, that had never changed. He steadily got to his feet, his fingers clenching and unclenching as he built up the courage to voice his decision. "Okay," he said, "I'm coming." The man nodded down at him in an understanding manner before turning away. "That's good to hear." He said, "Let's move, and drop that scroll. It will only make Konoha follow us." Naruto nodded, placing the scroll against a nearby tree. He then turned back around to the man who had already begun walking off. He followed quietly, doing his best to keep pace with this strange-looking person. He glanced up at him or them. He seemed to refer to himself as 2 separate people, and the way he spoke suggested just that. Naruto averted his gaze just as that person or persons glanced at him. He smirked, or at least the white side did. The black side remained straight-faced, which just made him all the more unusual. "I suppose since we are now traveling together, introductions are in order," he said. "You can call us Zetsu." Naruto raised his brow at Zetsu. He was still fairly certain this person was insane, but now he was beginning to understand why he thought so. He spoke of loneliness with such recognition, yet acted as if he was 2 different people and that both of them went by the same single name. It was enough to give him a headache, but then he blinked as Zetsu looked at him expectantly, awaiting a reply. "Oh, I'm Uzumaki Naruto," he said, looking ahead once more. He was really confused. He'd never imagined he'd be in a situation like this. It was unbelievable. Although he'd never been exactly happy in the village, it was still his home, right? But then again, he'd failed at becoming a shinobi once more. He knew that leaving would only make it almost impossible to become Hokage, but he was only a villager at the moment. It wouldn't be a big deal if he left, and he could probably come back later, right? Will I be able to come back? He thought, suddenly realizing he could. Yeah, this guy has to be a shinobi, and he managed to defeat Mizuki easily. If I can get him to train me, I'll become a genin in no time. Naruto almost asked Zetsu this, but decided against it. After all, this person was still rather intimidating. He was carrying Mizuki's corpse after all. But there was one thing he was curious about. You said there were others like me. He said, glancing up at Zetsu, so they're all in the same place. I think any further details about that should probably be given to you by Leader Sama. Zetsu replied, keeping his eyes ahead. To be honest, we're not entirely certain what's going on either. Leader Sama, Naruto repeated, so you're like part of a group or something. You could say that. We're more like an organization. Naruto raised his brow, looking ahead once more. They continued to walk in silence, the moonlight behind keeping their path clear. To anyone looking, it would have been a terrifying sight. Naruto noticed Zetsu's shadow cast across the ground. The thing around him resembled a set of jaws on the dirt. It was true, if appearances represented the person within, then Zetsu really was a monster. But from what Naruto had seen so far, he wasn't that at all. Hey Zetsu-san, Naruto asked, what are you going to do with him? Zetsu glanced down at Naruto for a moment before his eyes returned to the road ahead. I will consume him. He replied simply, okay, maybe he was a monster. The night sky was amazingly clear tonight. Such a thing hadn't been seen in quite a while. It was very rare for moonlight to be cast upon the village hidden in the rain, Aimgakure. But in this situation, it was better that the village could be seen. From a perch high above, a man sat on what appeared to be a long tongue protruding from a face, an architectural monstrosity as it was, but this man's preference nonetheless. His orange and spiky hair was darkened in the night, and the many piercings on his face would have been lost in the shadows if not for the shining orb high above. He watched the village below expressionlessly, his gray, rippled eyes studying the visible tears with complete disinterest. Yet at the same time, he couldn't draw his eyes away. It appears Zetsu-san was successful. He said, in a clear tone, Uzumaki Naruto, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, willingly complied. I see, replied a woman's voice from behind the mouth of the face inside the building. What has he learned? The boy is not a shinobi, he is still an academy-rank student. He has no ties to Konohagakure, and it appears the villagers do not trust him. It would seem leaving was an easy option for him. If he is only an academy student, then he will need training. The woman said, stepping out into the light. She looked at the man with amber eyes, her stoic persona almost completely believable. Her eyelids were painted the same color as her short hair, a cobalt blue. In her hair she wore a bun with an origami rose made of a very pale blue paper. Just below her lip was a silver stud, something which was nowhere near the extremes of the man before her. You are correct. The man agreed, glancing at her over his right. It will take some time. According to Zetsu-san, he is below amateurish. Do we really need someone that weak? The woman asked, her brow creasing. If you recall, we were once weak. The man replied, turning forward once again. I will leave deciding who will train him to you. The woman watched the man for a moment longer before nodding and turning away. And Conan? The man said, make sure he is secure. The power he possesses will be difficult to contain if unleashed. Do not make him feel trapped. I understand pain. Conan replied without looking back. She left the room, pain glancing back as he heard the door close. He turned ahead again, raising his hand to his mouth. This is going to take some time. He muttered, everything has changed. Zetsu glanced over his shoulder, his brow creasing in annoyance. Naruto noticed this and turned around but saw nothing, just the leaves moving gently in the breeze. He looked up at Zetsu questioningly, wondering what on earth could have instilled such a reaction. It seems Konoha still wishes to follow us. Zetsu muttered, they are tracking this one's scent. They're still after us. Naruto asked, looking back again, what for? I left the scroll like you told me to. The villages like to use people like you as weapons. Zetsu replied, they wish to capture you. Capture me? Naruto repeated worriedly. He didn't like the sound of that. It didn't seem like Konoha would do such a thing, but then he'd thought the same thing of Mizuki, so he didn't really know what to think. Zetsu crouched down on the ground, looking at Naruto expectantly. Get on. He ordered, the leaves on his head separating. We need to make haste. Naruto blinked. He didn't like the idea of climbing between those things that looked so much like a set of jaws. But the sounds of dogs barking helped make up his mind. He quickly climbed up Zetsu's back and onto his shoulders. Almost immediately, a kunai flew overhead, barely missing Naruto's left ear. Naruto was stunned. They were willing to attack him. His shock kept him noticing as the leaves on the leaves closed and Zetsu dived into the ground, immediately disappearing. It was pitch black inside the leaves. Naruto could see nothing. All his senses could give him was the constant dull rumbling from just outside and the feel of Zetsu's shoulders which he sat on. Something which struck Naruto's curiosity was that inside this place, the air was as clear as it would be outside. Cleaner, in fact, this surprised Naruto as they were in a cramped and enclosed space. He almost asked, but then he remembered Zetsu's strange appearance. Perhaps it was more than visual. He then felt Zetsu's head turn and saw a faint yellow glow coming from his eyes. "I hope you are not claustrophobic," he asked. "This journey could be a while." "No, I'm all right," Naruto replied. In truth, he used to hide under his bed during thunderstorms. It wasn't tight spaces he was afraid of, but I am feeling a little dizzy. "That's understandable," Zetsu said, turning back. "These conditions aren't ideal for others." Naruto stared at the back of Zetsu's head. This was most definitely a peculiar situation to be in. Even now, as he thought about it, it still didn't really make sense to him. However, one thing was certain. Zetsu was a shinobi, and he belonged to an organization possibly consisting of even more shinobi. That meant that if Naruto could convince them to train him, then he could become stronger much faster than if he'd stayed at the academy. That's what he was counting on anyway. "So how far are we going?" he asked, unsure of how fast they were going. He had never traveled in such a way, after all. "We won't be underground for much longer." Zetsu replied, "We have escaped the Konoha Nin." That surprised Naruto. They were already so far away. How could anything underground move at all, never mind with such speed? "I get it." Naruto thought aloud, "This must be a jutsu." "You are correct. He's only just realizing this." Naruto suddenly found his situation incredibly interesting. He had no idea this could be done with ninjutsu. It was amazing. He looked around. These leaves must be something to do with this jutsu, right? So what did they do, and how did Zetsu make them? Could he learn to do something like this? "You certainly do ask a lot of questions," Zetsu muttered. "Be quiet, it's annoying." Naruto blinked in surprise. He hadn't realized he'd said all that aloud. But still, they were questions he would definitely find the answers to sooner or later. It was just a matter of when. "This should do." "I agree." Naruto fell back as they ascended, the rumbling sound fading away as they broke through the surface. Naruto's back was pressed against the leaves as Zetsu stood, and he fell back onto the ground as they opened. "Ow!" Naruto complained, rubbing the back of his head. Zetsu looked back at Naruto expressionlessly. "Our journey is not yet over," he said, "and yet we must rest. It has been several days and we grow tired." "Really?" Naruto asked. After all the excitement, sleep was one of the last things on his mind. "Well, is there an inn or something?" "An inn?" Zetsu repeated with an amused look on his face. "No establishment would allow us inside. Besides, as we are sustained through methods unavailable at inns, we carry no money." "So we're sleeping outside?" Naruto asked, clearly not thrilled by the idea. He had slept outside a couple of times before as part of his self-training, but he hadn't particularly enjoyed it. However, if Zetsu didn't have any money then, there was nothing he could do about it. Zetsu took a few steps to the left, walking towards a tree next to some bushes. He sat down with his back against the tree, bowing his head as he immediately went to rest. Naruto paused before joining him, sitting against the tree to Zetsu's right, but not too close. He glanced up at the ever-peculiar man, who didn't acknowledge the gaze and kept his eyes closed. Naruto dropped his gaze and pulled up his collar. It was a cold night. "If I was ever gonna try and escape, now would probably be the best time," he thought. If he's been awake so long, slipping away shouldn't be. He huddled up tight, trying his best to keep the cold out. It was particularly chilly tonight. The cool breeze had become sharper, and the temperature had dropped considerably. All the sweat on Naruto's body kept him damp, which helped in no way whatsoever. He shifted down into a lying position, curling into a ball for warmth. How anyone could sleep in these conditions was beyond him. Naruto's brow raised a little as he felt something very light touch his head. He glanced up. A leaf had fallen on him. His brow raised further as more leaves began to flutter from their branches, floating down towards him. This was strange. Summer had barely started, so why were leaves falling? They all fell on and around Naruto, covering him like a blanket. He slowly cast his eyes down, and his surprise reached its epitome as he found out the reason for the leaves' strange actions. Zetsu's right hand was pressed against the trunk of the tree, putting unnecessary pressure on it. Zetsu was doing this for him. Naruto was taken aback. It didn't seem like something this person would do. Maybe I'll go with him. Naruto thought as he lowered his goggles over his eyes. The eye on Zetsu's white side opened slightly, surveying Naruto casually. He allowed a small smile before closing it again. That was surprisingly kind of you. He thought, our orders are to bring him to Leader Sama. He will not appreciate a sick child. Ah, I see. In the eyes of God. Naruto woke the next morning to the dawn sun breaking over the horizon. The sky was a clear and calming blue, gently overlooking the world as it hazily opened its eyes. He sat up, the leaves that had served as his blanket rustling as they fell to the ground. He shuffled back against the tree, raising his goggles back to his forehead. For a moment, Naruto wondered where he was. The air was something new to him, and not just because it was clean. He had a feeling like he was completely at ease, as if there was no weight at all holding him down. It was nice he could really get used to it. He glanced to his left, raising his brow in surprise. There was a person next to him, a man with fair skin and dark hair. He sat exactly where Zetsu had and was wearing his cloak for some reason. But he was fast asleep, his head bowed peacefully. Naruto leant forward, looking at this man curiously. He did sort of look like Zetsu, although because of that person's peculiar face, distinguishing features had been hard to make out. But this one had the same kind of hair and an identical build. Really, the only things that were different were the color of his skin and the missing leaves that engulfed Zetsu. Maybe this guy is Zetsu-san. Naruto thought, cocking his head to the side. Maybe the way he looks is just a jutsu, and it wears off when he goes to sleep. Suddenly, Zetsu opened his eyes, and in an instant he went through a transformation. White and black rushed up his body, hastily returning his skin to his former color. Naruto also noticed his eyes were blue, but then they turned to yellow as the two waves of non-color flooded past them. There was also a rustling sound as the leaves seemed to grow from his cloak, quickly surrounding him once more. In a moment, he looked exactly the same as he did last night, minus the difference in lighting. He glanced to his right, raising his brow curiously as he saw Naruto had crawled back several feet, pointing an accusing finger at him with an incredulous look. What the hell just happened? Naruto demanded, looking seriously spooked. There was no way that was a jutsu. Zetsu hadn't made any hand seals or anything. What are you talking about? Zetsu asked. It's rude to point. Your skin, it was normal a moment ago. Naruto stammered, his hand shaking in shock. Zetsu narrowed his eyes at Naruto, a reproachful look on his face. I beg your pardon? He asked venomously. For us, this is normal. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. Naruto said hastily with a horrified look on his face. He bowed forward, sweat pouring down his face. I'm sorry, I was just surprised. Zetsu looked at Naruto for a moment longer before his expression relaxed. He got to his feet, looking at the path ahead. We wouldn't know about that. He said expressionlessly, we were asleep after all. With that, he began walking off, leaving the boy on his hands and knees. Naruto raised his head, the sweat subsiding, and quickly clambered to his feet before following. They didn't walk on the main path as Naruto had expected. Instead, they kept to the trees, walking far enough from the road that they wouldn't likely be spotted easily. Naruto had no idea where they were. Geography wasn't his strong point. But Zetsu seemed to know where he was going, which was great. It would be pretty lame if he didn't. Naruto found himself constantly glancing up at Zetsu, but he never looked back. Naruto bowed his head. He had been pretty out of line back there. He just hadn't imagined Zetsu would be so defensive about it. Neither of him really seemed like that type. But then, who was he to judge? Man, I screwed up. He thought, I shouldn't have said that. I suppose you will be hungry. Zetsu asked without looking. Our diet is probably not best suited for you. Huh? Naruto looked up at Zetsu in surprise. It looked like he had already let what Naruto said go. That actually kind of made Naruto feel guiltier. It seemed like Zetsu was used to that sort of thing. I'm fine. However, as if to contradict his words, it was then that his stomach chose to make its presence known. Zetsu cocked a brow and reached into his cloak. There is an inn up ahead. He said, pulling out a small package. Help yourself to breakfast, we will wait outside. He handed the package over to Naruto, which turned out to be a wallet. Naruto accepted it curiously, looking back up at Zetsu. I thought you didn't have any money. He asked, confused. Zetsu nodded. Indeed we don't. He said simply before pointing off to the right. It is over there, we will wait for you up ahead. Naruto blinked again, looking between the wallet and the point Zetsu was gesturing to. Then he glanced back up at Zetsu questioningly before nodding and hurrying off. He soon found the road again, and like Zetsu had said, he could see an inn further down. He walked down the path towards it. It didn't seem particularly busy, or maybe it was just too early. He gripped the wallet in his hands, wondering how much he had. He lifted it to eye level, and with his other hand, he undid the button and opened it. His eyes widened in shock as Mizuki's looked right back at him. "Gah!" he cried, dropping the wallet on the ground. He stared down at the picture inside the identification card, which seemed to stare back coolly. This was Mizuki's wallet. Zetsu must have taken it. Naruto watched it nervously, as if it would attack him like its owner did. But after a few moments, he got over this irrational fear and cautiously crouched down. He reached out to it, almost afraid of its touch. He couldn't stand the idea of carrying that thing with him, but he was really hungry. He reached into the fabric, carefully pulling out the money inside. It wasn't much, but he would have probably felt guiltier if it was more. Mizuki had tried to kill him and had killed Uruka, but he still felt uneasy about doing something as underhanded as this. He took the money in his hand and got to his feet. He continued to watch the face in the wallet, hoping he wouldn't be judged for this. Then he walked over it, wanting to make as much distance from that thing as he could. He reached the inn, which really looked like a pleasant place to be. It seemed more like a large cottage than the inns back at Konoha. It really gave the building a warm glow. He stepped inside the front doors, and the two receptionists at the desk smiled at him. They were almost identical middle-aged women with brown tied-back hair. In fact, the only differences was how they parted their hair. The one on the left had hers parted to the left, and vice versa to the other one. "Good morning, young man," the woman on the left said cheerfully before the other one asked, "How can we help you?" Naruto, who was taken aback by the similarities between the two women, momentarily forgot the reason he had come at all. However, his stomach was eager to remind him. He put his hand against it and the other behind his head before grinning nervously at the two women. "Hi, is there a place I can get something to eat?" he asked, rubbing his head. "Of course." The woman on the right replied brightly, "Our cafeteria is just down this way, enjoy." "Oh, thanks," Naruto replied, smiling at them both. He then headed in the direction the woman was gesturing, down the hall to his right. Even inside was nicely decorated. The walls were a warm Naples yellow, with ferns hanging between the doors to the rooms of the... At the end of the hallway, a set of double doors opened up into a terrace, where there were round wooden tables with parasols for people to eat at. Outside the terrace, there was a water feature, a koi pond if Naruto remembered correctly. The place had an air of luxury around it, which really gave Naruto a feeling of displacement. "Man, I really don't belong in a place like this," he thought, looking around nervously, "but I can't just leave. Zetsu-san is annoyed with me as it is." "Can I help you, young man?" Naruto glanced to his left with a raised brow. Along the wall of the inn was an opening to the kitchen, where a counter had been placed for trade. Behind it stood a young man who smiled welcomingly at Naruto. He had short brown hair, a little messy, but in an intentional way. Naruto walked over to him, looking at the menu attached to the counter in front of him. The young man waited patiently for Naruto's reply, recognizing his unease. "I suppose you're not used to ordering for yourself?" he asked with an understanding smile. "Oh, it's not that," Naruto replied, looking up at the man. If there was one thing Naruto knew how to do, it was order for himself. "I've just never been to a place like this before." "Don't travel much, huh?" the man asked. "Well, there isn't really much difference here than a takeaway, except for quality, of course. Just take your time and let me know when you've made your decision." "Okay," Naruto replied, taking an instant liking to this guy. He reminded him of Ayame, the waitress at Naruto's favorite place to eat, Ikaraku Ramen. The thought of leaving that place behind almost made Naruto want to go back to Konoha now, but he resisted. Yes." "I take it you found something?" the young man asked. "Yeah, pork miso ramen," Naruto replied, adding emphasis to each word. "All right, coming right up," the young man replied before turning around and setting to work. Naruto glanced around before taking a seat in a nearby chair at one of the tables. He glanced around. It really was nice here. Birds were flying in the trees outside, singing away without embarrassment. The fish in the pond swam absent-mindedly, curious about their own home. Any residents of the inn were still fast asleep. It looked like Naruto was the only awake customer they had right now. "You know, I don't think I've ever met anyone who ordered ramen for breakfast," the young man said as he poured the noodles into the bowl. "Well, you have now," Naruto replied brightly. It was true. Ikaraku Ramen had never been busy in the morning. Ramen was more of a heavy meal, better suited for lunch or dinner. However, Naruto burnt most of the calories gained from his incredible diet in between meals, so it wasn't really a problem for him. "I guess there really is a first time for anything." The man smiled as he added the soup. Naruto nodded in agreement, a wasted movement considering the man couldn't see him. Well, here you go. The young man placed the steaming bowl of ramen out for Naruto, who got up to take it. He reached out and placed all the money he'd taken from Mizuki's wallet and placed it before the young man. Thanks, Naruto replied before he took his ramen and walked back to the table, placing it down with the chopsticks he'd picked up. Hold on a minute, the man said with a startled look. This is more than twice the cost. That's all right, you can keep the change. Naruto replied. It wasn't out of generosity, he just really wanted to get that money off his hands. Are you sure about that? The young man asked. They pooled tips in this inn, so he really couldn't be greedy about Naruto's decision. Mom, Naruto replied, his mouth already full of food. The young man shrugged before taking the money and putting it away. He then returned to getting the breakfast options ready, leaving Naruto to his meal. It was really good, this ramen. Nothing on Ikaraku's, but he definitely enjoyed it. It wasn't completely perfect, however. He had bought it with Mizuki's money after all. The money Zetsu had taken just for Naruto's sake. Naruto looked down into his ramen, losing his appetite a little. He had only just met Zetsu last night, but he couldn't help feeling guilty about his reaction. He had been almost exactly like the villagers in Konoha. No, I was worse. He thought shamefully, because I knew what he was like and then I acted that way. It really made him feel like scum. Was this what it was like to be on the other side of things? Zetsu hadn't judged him, so why was it so easy for Naruto to turn it around? Was it because of what happened with Mizuki and what Zetsu had intended to do with him? It was pretty easy to judge him by those standards, but Naruto knew very well that there was more than that. Zetsu had helped him out 3 times now, even though he didn't know Naruto at all. To be honest, Zetsu kind of reminded Naruto of himself a little. He smiled weakly into his bowl, the soup reflecting his expression back at him. There really hadn't been enough noodle in it. He picked up the bowl and drained the rest of it, swallowing every last drop. He then turned around and walked over to the counter, where the young man looked at him, a clear sweat drop on his brow. So fast, he muttered weakly as Naruto placed the empty bowl down. He then blinked in surprise as Naruto smiled to himself before glancing up at the young man. Actually, I was wondering if you could do something for me, Naruto said. Zetsu-san is certainly taking his time. Konan said as she stood by the window. Of course. Pain replied from his perch. He had kept the weather clear. He had expected Zetsu to arrive sooner. He isn't alone after all. It would seem he has taken Naruto-san's needs into great consideration. That's quite a surprise, Konan said, placing her hand on the wall. I never really imagined he would go to such lengths for someone else. Pain glanced over his shoulder, his expressionless face revealing nothing. It was enough to almost make Konan flinch. He then looked ahead again with Conan's eyes locked on him. Perhaps you are growing comfortable, he said. Do you find your life to be peaceful? Don't be ridiculous, Konan replied, looking away. Pain looked out the corner of his eye, sensing her expression. He soon looked away, not caring to maintain the motion. You are many things, Konan, but a good judge of character you are not. He thought, however, that may change soon. Have you decided who it will be to train Naruto-san? He asked, sitting back. He looked surprisingly relaxed for someone who was always in deep thought. Konan looked at him again, quietly glad of the change in topic. Yes, I have, she replied. Here you go, Naruto said brightly, holding his hands out to Zetsu. What is this? Zetsu asked as he took the object from Naruto's hands. It was a cup with a pair of chopsticks inside, filled with something steaming. He looked inside with a raised brow. Ramen. Yeah, I just figured you probably don't eat people all the time, Naruto replied, grinning as he rubbed the back of his head. Zetsu gave him a bemused look before continuing on his way with Naruto close behind. They climbed up a tall hill as Zetsu silently ate the ramen. Naruto couldn't remove the grin from his face as he watched him do this. It was then that he noticed something he probably should have earlier. Hey, what happened to Mizuki-sans? He asked, leaving his question hanging. Zetsu looked up from his cup, a slightly confused look on his face. Mizuki-san, he repeated before remembering. Oh yes, we had to leave him underground. He was making progress difficult. Naruto stared at Zetsu as he returned to his meal. So Mizuki at least got something like a burial, huh? Well, everyone deserved that in the end, at least that's what Naruto thought. They continued their climb until Zetsu finished eating, to which he then handed the empty cup to Naruto. There wasn't very much noodle in that. Zetsu muttered to himself. It was his more serious side, so Naruto didn't mind. In actual fact, it was a little amusing that they shared the same thought. Could you keep a hold of that for us? Please don't throw it away. Naruto nodded in reply, just as they reached the top of the hill. It was rounded, every direction was a descent. They came to a stop near a mossy patch where Zetsu crouched down. He held his left hand in a seal, and to Naruto's surprise, the moss moved out of the way, revealing a deep hole into nothingness. It was quite wide, about 2 meters diameter from what he could guess. He looked at Zetsu questioningly, who was sitting down with his legs hanging inside the hole. "Is this it?" he asked. He hadn't imagined it would be so close or in such an unusual place. But then again, where would this organization Zetsu spoke of meet? They couldn't belong to a village, they had to be missing Nin or something. Whoa! Naruto thought as he was hit with that sudden realization, Zetsu-san's a missing Nin. Does that mean I'm working with criminals now? "Come here," Zetsu ordered, to which Naruto complied. He then gripped Naruto's arm before dropping down into the hole. "Hwa!" Naruto yelled as they fell down an immeasurable distance, but the fall lasted only for moments. They soon landed on solid ground, Zetsu landing first before lowering Naruto onto the ground. When Naruto was on his own feet, he looked around in surprise. The cave they were in, if that was the right name, had absolute zero visibility, minus the shaft of light coming from the hole above, which shone across the cavern behind them as the sun had only recently risen. It cast deep down into a tunnel, where there was the faint sound of rushing water. This place must have been a series of underground tunnels with a natural water system. This place is actually kind of cool, Naruto thought, gazing around. Having been stuck in Konoha all his life, exploration was something new and exciting to him. That was why he found this place so interesting. This was the first cave he had ever been in. "So you are here." Naruto whipped his head around in shock. That voice, it wasn't normal. It sounded like it had been filtered somehow, like through a broken transceiver. But it also seemed to have no origin. It had sounded close, yet there was no one close enough to have said it. Naruto was almost tempted to believe that Zetsu had a third personality, but that wouldn't have explained the quality of the voice. "We have him with us, Leader Sama," Zetsu said. Naruto turned back to the front, his eyes widening in shock. Before them, a strange green glow flickered into existence, taking on a humanoid form. It wasn't clear, but it looked like a man. His body was almost transparent. It was difficult to make anything out. The best Naruto could see was that he wore the same cloak as Zetsu, but it fit him like it should. He could also see that this person's hair was even spikier than his own, with a more wild look to it. But the thing that really caught Naruto's attention was this person's eyes. They were completely visible. Both the iris and sclera were a shade of gray, the iris outlined in a thin black circle. There were 3 more circles like that outside the iris, making his eyes look like ripples in a pool. They studied Naruto closely, with an incredibly penetrating gaze. It almost felt like he was looking through Naruto at something else entirely. This was only momentary, however, as the man then looked Naruto in the eye seriously. It was strange. This man's presence was so strong, Naruto could feel his back straighten under his gaze. "Uzumaki Naruto," the man said, "welcome." Thanks," Naruto replied dumbly. He wondered how this guy could know his name, but it wasn't a big worry in his mind. The man then glanced at Zetsu, who nodded before sinking into the ground. Naruto raised his brow at this. Why was Zetsu being asked to leave? "I assume Zetsu-san has told you nothing of our organization?" the man asked, returning his eyes to Naruto's. "No, nothing really," Naruto replied, his eyes wide. The man nodded slowly, as if that was what he had expected. "Zetsu-san acts as our spy," he said in an informal yet somehow official tone. "Therefore he is better suited for seeking information, not dispensing it." "Is he always alone?" Naruto asked, not realizing how out of place his question was. It made the man stare a little harder at him. "Tell me, what do you know about Zetsu-san?" he asked, his tone losing its official quality. Naruto noticed it. He was a little surprised. "Well, he seems to get what it means to be alone," he replied, "and I think he's used to it. People are afraid of him because of how he looks, and no one wants to know what's inside him. I think he's in pain." The man continued to stare at Naruto silently, considering his words slowly. "Tell me, what do you know of pain?" he asked. "Tell me the pain you have felt." What?" Naruto asked, feeling taken aback. This person had suddenly become very curious about him. It came as a shock to him. "My pain." Akatsuki is an organization consisting of a group of ninja who have left their villages for their own reasons. Some have felt betrayal. Others were never in a position to be betrayed in the first place. We all have our reasons. I would like you to tell me yours. Akatsuki was the name of the organization Zetsu mentioned, and he had called this man Leader Sama, so he was the boss of this group then. And why was he so interested in finding Naruto's reasons, and what was this about his pain? Suddenly, it hit him. I get it. He said, lowering his head slightly, his hair obscuring his eyes. My pain, well, there's the pain of being alone. I know that one pretty well, but there's more than that. It's the pain of no one giving you the chance, of no one even wanting to acknowledge you. Sometimes I wish people could see what's inside, but in my case. He then looked up, locking eyes with the man. In my case, the only thing they see is what's inside of me. He said, his brow creasing angrily. That's all they ever saw, the Kyuubi, and it's all you see as well, isn't it? If this man was surprised by Naruto's outburst, he didn't show it. Instead, he turned away, his back to Naruto. Come to Aimgakure. He said, we will continue this there. With that, he disappeared, leaving Naruto alone in the cave. He was a little surprised by the sudden disappearance, but then a lot had surprised him recently. He was getting a little sick of it, to be honest. Moments later, Zetsu appeared from the ground again, only ascending halfway, and looked up at Naruto expressionlessly. Leader Sama has left. He stated, surprised. He gave you orders then. Yeah. Naruto replied, turning to face Zetsu. He said to come to a place called Aimgakure. Know where that is. I should. Zetsu replied before turning away. Get in. If Leader Sama gave you the order, then it wouldn't do to keep him waiting. Naruto blinked before complying. He climbed back onto Zetsu's shoulders, realizing he still had the empty cup in his hands. As such, he could only keep his balance with one hand as the leaves closed again and the burrowed underground. Is it really wise to bring him here? Conan asked as Pain climbed in through the window. With a quick hand sign, the rain began to fall outside, ending the reprieve of the village. This situation is different than with Akatsuki. He replied, looking back at Conan. The Jinchuriki must be handled with care. They won't be so easy to control as normal human beings are. He took a few steps through the dark room, heading to the door. He paused for a moment, which surprised Conan a little. She followed him out of the room and into the empty hallway, which was lit by candles. The blue walls and orange light didn't mix well, but aesthetics weren't the primary concern of these two, nor of those who resided in this building. If any of those people were fit to complain, then this would be the wrong place for them anyway. The Jido Maz was completely destroyed. Pain said as he walked. As such, harnessing the power of the Biju is impossible. Now our only option is to convince them to align themselves with us if we are to succeed. But why start with the Kyuubi? Conan asked, keeping just a couple of steps behind. Wouldn't it be better to seek someone who was skilled with their Biju instead of a child? It is because he is an inexperienced child that he must be the one. Pain replied, the older Jinchuriki do not trust humans, but if they were met with one of their own, they could be swayed. We must mold Uzumaki Naruto, the youngest Jinchuriki who is sealed with the strongest Biju. Only then can we even consider seeking the others. But what if they won't listen? Conan asked. There's no guarantee that they will come because of Naruto-san. Pain didn't answer immediately. He knew as soon as he voiced these words it would be a sign of weakness. It is not necessary for us to wield all of the Biju. He said, as long as we can possess a majority, any without doubts are obstacles. Conan raised her brow in surprise. She would never have expected Pain to accept less than everything. It was something she had never seen in him before. Pain continued to walk in silence, his mind deep in concentration. Tell me, Pain, what can you see here? Madara asked, gesturing to the stone tablet before them. Pain studied it closely. The writing on it appeared to be in strange seals. The majority of it made no sense to him, but the last part was infallibly clear. It seems to describe the origins of the Biju. Madara explained that they at one time were unified as a single being known as the Jubai. There is also information here relating to the Rikudo Sennin, and that he was very closely related to the Jubai. The first parts are readable only with the Sharingan and then the Mangekyou. However, the last part is readable only by the wielder of the Rinnegan, as I'm sure you've realized. Pain nodded slowly as he reread the tablet again. This tablet tells me one thing, he said. Madara glanced at him with stoic anticipation. And that is, he asked with slight impatience. Pain slowly closed his eyes before opening them again. Shinra Tensei. As the rain fell from the sky and the clouds grayed the earth, two figures walked blindly as they sought their destination. With water so thick, sight was all but abandoned, and they relied only on the shadows around them to guide their way, or at least that was Zetsu's case. Naruto had his goggles on. Whoa, where's all this rain coming from? Naruto asked as he finally found a bin to drop the cup in. Zetsu glanced down at him, but continued walking towards a particularly tall shadow that loomed overhead. "The is aim, after all," he replied, his voice partially drowned out by the water. "We could already be there if not for your inability to remain inside for extended periods of time." "Sorry, I don't want to slow you down," Naruto said, looking at Zetsu, but it was true, he was feeling dizzy after traveling all the way here underground. Then again, he wasn't thrilled to be out in this much rain either. It wasn't as bad as for Zetsu, but his collar was pretty wide too. And like Zetsu and everyone else they passed for that matter, he was getting very, very wet. He almost tripped as he suddenly found Zetsu and himself climbing a set of stairs. Not like in a house. These were those weird stairs that went a few meters before rising again. Those annoyed Naruto. He always thought they used up too much space. But whatever, judging by the look on Zetsu's face, they were nearing their destination. This was confirmed as a large building filled their view. It was like a tower, reaching to a height Naruto couldn't make out. But then again, trying would only obscure his vision more so. As such, he kept his head on his feet as he and Zetsu entered the building through the doubled doors. Naruto shook his head vigorously, not having to worry about Zetsu, whose leaves blocked excess water. They stood in a large entrance hall, black marble floor reflecting the light of a chandelier hanging above. The walls were decorated with flowers, although Naruto almost immediately disregarded this, as he would. Along the walls, armchairs were placed, giving a feeling like they were in a waiting room of sorts. Of course, it wasn't like a doctor's office where they were all over the place. There was a small group just to their left placed casually, and along the right side wall was a sofa with 2 armchairs on an angle at either side. They were all made of black leather and didn't help with the gloomy aristocratic vibe the place was giving Naruto. It was also freezing in here. There seemed to be no heating on offer. The receptionists at the desk along the left wall didn't seem to mind. Perhaps they had a radiator over there, or were just used to the conditions. They walked inside a little further before they were met by what appeared to be a chunin of this village, although his headband was slashed. Did that mean he was a missing nin like Zetsu? The man looked between Zetsu and Naruto before bowing. "Zetsu-sama, Naruto-sama, right this way," he said before turning and walking away. "Naruto-sama," Naruto repeated, looking up at Zetsu questioningly, but Zetsu just gestured for him to hurry, which he did. The chunin led them to a door before turning to them and bowing again. "Please, Naruto-sama, there is a change of clothing for you just in there," he said before opening the door and waiting. Naruto glanced up at Zetsu again, who rolled his eyes before lightly shoving Naruto inside. The chunin closed the door and left Naruto on his own. He appeared to be in a changing room/toilet, judging by the floor-to-ceiling mirror and the toilet. There was a chair in the corner with a towel and a change of clothes on it. Naruto shrugged before picking the towel up and drying off his head. An annoying thing about hair like his, it retained a lot of water. On reflection, it might have been wiser to dry the rest of his body first, but it was too late now. He removed his jacket and shirt, both of which were thoroughly soaked, and lightly rubbed the towel into his arms and chest. By this point, the towel was soaked thoroughly. There was no use for it now. Luckily, Naruto spotted a hand dryer opposite the mirror. He took the clothes off the chair and moved it under the hand dryer, keeping the clothes on his lap. He then reached up and pressed the button, allowing the hot air to dry his back. It was a move he instantly regretted. "OWOWOWOWOWOWOWOW." Naruto yelled, rolling his back against the cold floor. He was sure he just ignited his neck. It still burned even with the tiles on the floor soothing it. "Is everything all right, Naruto-sama?" the man's voice asked from outside. Naruto sat up, rubbing the back of his neck sorely. "Yeah, it's all right," Naruto replied, getting to his feet. He checked his back in the mirror, looking for burn marks. Luckily, there were none. It was just stinging. He removed his trousers and hung them over the back of the chair. There hadn't been a breeze, so the rain had fallen straight down. As a result, his legs weren't as wet as the rest of him was. That meant he didn't have to worry about changing them. He reached for the change of clothes, which had fallen to the floor as he had. He picked them up and placed them on the seat of the chair before changing. It looked like the clothes were thick navy slacks with a black and gray pullover resting on top of them. He pulled the slacks on first, the fit nicely, something which was a surprise considering he was pretty short for his age. He then threw the pullover on, which also fit well. Had they somehow gotten his measurements or something? That didn't seem likely, but all the same, the clothes were quite comfortable. He pulled the zip on the pullover up as far as it went, before grabbing his wet clothes and leaving. On the other side of the door, Zetsu and the chunin were still waiting for him, but there was also a female attendant, a blonde woman with short, clipped hair. She smiled to Naruto and held her hand out for the wet clothes. Naruto blinked in surprise before passing them on to her. She gave a quick bow before walking away, heading down a corridor on the left of the room. Naruto then looked up to Zetsu, who appeared bored. "Now that you are changed and dry, we had better not put our appointment off any longer," he said, looking to the Chunin. "You may return to your post." "Very well, Zetsu-sama," the Chunin replied, bowing before leaving. Zetsu then gestured for Naruto to follow him as he headed for the corridor on the right of the room, which turned a corner almost immediately, heading further back into the building. Naruto smoothed out the sleeves of his pullover, smiling to himself. He had never owned anything that had actually fitted him before. This was kind of nice. He looked up as Zetsu came to a stop outside a door. "It appears we have a long ascent ahead of us." He sighed. "We'd better get it over with." "Are they here?" Pain asked as he stepped into the room he so often inhabited. "Yes, they are on their way up as we speak." Conan replied from her usual spot by the window. "Everything is prepared. His training can start whenever you give the word." "Good, he will need all the training he can get." Pain said as he climbed through the window. "Just make sure Naruto-san isn't overworked. You know how he can get." "Of course." Pain didn't head all the way out. It had been raining after all. Sitting out there would be stupid. As it was, he simply stood in the mouth of the statue, gazing outside into the rain. After mere moments of this, he came back in, walking to the center of the room. "Is there a problem?" Conan asked, not used to seeing Pain so mobile. "A change in plans. We will not be proceeding as intended." He replied, looking back at her. "Is there a problem?" Conan asked, feeling alarmed by this news. "No, not yet anyway," Pain muttered. "It's just a precaution." Conan stared at Pain, still feeling uncertain. He had never changed his plans before, but then Madara was usually the one taking the lead. So was this Pain managing on his own? "Conan, there is something I need you to take care of." Huh. Naruto held his hands against his knees, breathing heavily. He had lost count of the amount of stairs he'd climbed a long time ago. He was fairly certain someone had put him in a genjutsu. After all, Zetsu seemed to be having no trouble at all. It was almost like someone's cruel joke who would want to be in a place so high. "There's gotta be a quicker way," he panted, straightening up again. "Stop your whining, we are almost there." "Yeah, compared to where we started," Naruto muttered, but he continued on anyway, climbing each stair as his legs protested. And it wasn't a peaceful protest, that was definite. The stairway they were climbing conveyed none of the elegance of the entrance hall. This was simple, blue walls, green railings, and linoleum floors. It seemed more like a fire escape than a stairway. Although, considering it was Zetsu who was taking the lead, that wasn't impossible. They ascended a couple more floors before finally stepping out into a hallway, to Naruto's immense relief. He placed his hand on the wall for support, his aching legs threatening to succumb to gravity. He looked around the hall. It seemed to follow the same style as the entrance down below. There were windows at either end with violet curtains hanging around them. There were candles lined along them walls, but at the moment they were not in use. "In here," Zetsu said, leading Naruto to the door in the very center of the hallway. It was a double again, a pair of mahogany gates standing between Naruto and the man he had spoken to before. It was more than a little nerve-wracking. He really wasn't looking forward to being under the gaze of those eyes. But all the same, he waited as Zetsu knocked. "Enter," rang out a voice from inside. Zetsu turned to Naruto, bowing his head. "This is where we make our goodbyes," he said. "Try not to anger Leader Sama." "What? While you're going?" Naruto asked in surprise. Zetsu nodded in reply before sinking into the ground and disappearing completely. Naruto stared at the spot Zetsu had been, shocked at the sudden departure. It hadn't been long, but he had actually grown to quite like Zetsu in some ways. Not wanting to hear the voice repeat his order, Naruto reluctantly turned away, opening the door and walking in. The room inside was very bare. Stone walls and wooden floors were all the decoration offered. The only source of light came from the large square window, or whatever it was. It didn't have any glass. The room was more wide than long, and it seemed well used, despite its lack of furnishing. Naruto walked into the middle of the room, looking around for the person who had spoken. The corners were in shadows. The light offered wasn't great, but no matter how he squinted, he could see no signs of the voice's source. "Over here." Naruto blinked, looking at the window. He walked over to it, realizing that outside was a model or statue of some sorts. He couldn't make it out from where he was standing, but what he could see was a long tongue which stuck out like a ledge of sorts. Miraculously, the rain had somehow stopped, and the ledge was completely dry. Naruto didn't really notice this, however. His attention was brought to something else entirely. Sitting down with his back to Naruto, there was a man. His hair was a strong shade of orange and looked even wilder than Naruto's. His ears bore several black piercings, 6 hoops, and a vertical bar that ran through from one end to the other. He was also wearing a cloak just like Zetsu had, although his fit like it should. Naruto noticed that while this man was sitting down, he hadn't placed himself on the center of the tongue as someone normally would, if someone ever would. He sat on the left side of the tongue, as if offering room on the right. This thought was confirmed with a hand gesture as the man beckoned him forward. Naruto did so, taking a seat beside the man. One look into his eyes was all Naruto needed. "You're Leader-sama?" he asked, his eyes wide with surprise. This man was much younger than expected, maybe in his late teens or early 20s. His face was also heavily pierced. He had 3 bars running through his nose and 2 spikes through his lower lip. Like with his ears, each one was black, giving a very strange aura to him. Naruto was beginning to get an idea why this man was so interested in his pain. "That is the term my subordinates call me by." The man replied, "For the moment you may call me Deva." "Deva," Naruto repeated. It was an odd name, but kind of cool. "Sure thing, Deva-san." "That will do." "Right, so why am I here anyway?" Deva leaned forward slightly, so he was sitting upright. Naruto, who was already in that position, glanced outwards as Deva pointed. "Tell me what you see out there," he said, among the higher levels of the buildings on the far side of the village. Naruto blinked before leaning forward, kneeling as he squinted ahead. He scanned the distant buildings, trying to spot anything out of the ordinary. What he could see was the upper floors of the skyscrapers. It seemed there were more in that area. If he really concentrated, he could make out minute people moving around those levels, with bags and umbrellas and other things that didn't belong on high floors of buildings. It looked like those floors consisted of small, lively streets, rather than homes or offices. And there was something else about it. All the well-off people live higher up, Naruto said slowly, and the place has been built so they don't ever have to go down to the lower levels. "Very good," Deva replied, nodding in agreement, "and down there." Naruto cast his gaze downwards. It wasn't hard to see the contrast. People fled in their gray world, moving from building to building as they sought refuge from the rain which still fell upon them, the remnants from the higher levels. It was a result of the architecture of the village. Although from appearance it seemed more like a city from perspective, the various pipes and other overhanging structures gathered water and dropped it heavily on the people below, pelting them with enough force to make them flinch. Naruto's eyes were wide as he surveyed the sight below. Had he really come through that? "It's so," he began, but found himself unable to finish the sentence. Deva nodded, finding his answer acceptable. He sat back again, his expression and his stance having nothing in common. "Do you know that down there are even lower levels?" he asked, gazing out at nothing in particular. "Down on those levels, a man spends hours working to keep a generator running, so he can afford to keep his wife and child fed and sheltered. But the power he helps maintain runs through an intricate system. Rather than working from the point of origin and running around the village in a circuit, it is purposefully directed to the wealthiest homes first, and steadily moving down to the poorest and most desolate households, such as that of the very man who worked so hard to get it." Naruto stared at Deva as he said these things, his brow creased in concentration. Deva then shifted his gaze slightly, so he was looking out to a particular building to the left. And at this very moment, the scientists of this place, those who are thriving from that power, are working around the clock to devise a way to make that very same generator self-sustaining. If they succeed, there will be no need for anyone to work there. "Can't we do anything for that man?" Naruto asked, stunned by the selfishness of those scientists. "No, there is nothing more that can be done for that man or his family." Deva replied, 3 days ago they came here to reside." "Really?" Naruto asked brightly. This place wasn't exactly comforting, but it had to be better than whatever was down there. Deva looked Naruto in the eye. "Naruto-san, this place is a mortuary," he said. Naruto's mouth hung open and his eyes widened. He was silently stunned. Deva broke contact and turned his head up to the sky, watching the clouds move around. "That man and his wife, his little girl as well. They both came here 3 days ago. I learned their names. They were Shinjin, Mikomi, and Musai." Naruto was in disbelief. Even in his mind, he couldn't formulate any coherent thoughts. It was just the mental image of what Deva had told him that ran through his mind. It was an unfathomable cruelty. He almost didn't want to believe people were capable of something like that. Now let me ask you something more, Naruto-san. If you had the power, what would you do with it, now that you know this story? Naruto blinked, seeing Deva once more. If he had the power, well, I'd make sure nothing like that ever happened again. He replied, I'd do what I could to make sure they wouldn't have to suffer like that. Deva studied Naruto closely, apparently dissatisfied with this response. He raised his hand to his mouth as his eyes returned to the village. No, that would help no one. He said, taking Naruto by surprise. The difference between Shinjin-san and those scientists is that he knew what pain felt like. It was that pain which helped him grow and showed him the right way to live. This village is nowhere near even being considered perfect. If he had wanted, he could have easily turned to crime to feed his family, but he didn't. Because he knew what pain was, and that doing so would only cause pain to the people he felt didn't deserve it. He was a kind man, but an ignorant one. Naruto listened intently, not sure if he liked the sound of a man like that being called ignorant. Tell me, have you ever placed your hand in fire or fallen to the ground? Deva asked in a rhetorical tone. It is the pain gained from those experiences that keep us from making those mistakes. They enlighten us and make us more than what we would be without it. However you look at it, anyone who cannot recognize pain cannot grow and can never understand peace. Naruto wasn't especially clever, but he knew that much. If you are never sad, then you can't understand happiness. And if you are never lonely, you can't appreciate having others around you. So then, for pain and peace to share such a connection, it wasn't just believable to Naruto. Earlier, you accused me of being interested only in the Kyuubi. Deva said, moving from his sitting position so he was kneeling forward, one hand on the ledge and the other hanging off his knee. That is not true. You see, what I want is to show those people, like the scientists up there. I want to show them what pain feels like, so that maybe they can understand the pain they cause others and grow from it. And from that pain, peace can be born. So you see, Naruto, it is not the weapon of the Kyuubi which I seek. It is the help of you yourself. Me, Naruto asked, bewildered. He knew very little of the Kyuubi, but one thing he was certain of was that on a scale of power, he wouldn't even rank on it. But what can I do? Deva let out a sigh, looking down at the ledge as he dropped his gaze. I will confess this was not my initial intention. He said, in an even less formal tone, I had planned on simply using you as another of my subordinates as a weapon like you believed. However, during our first meeting, I saw something in you I almost didn't believe. You know well, a pain I have never truly experienced. I saw the pain of loneliness in your eyes, and it burned greater than any of my pain. I have never been alone, so I have never felt what it is like. As such, I am incomplete. What I need is someone who greatly understands the pain I lack, so that my goals may truly be justified. So Naruto-san, I ask you, will you help me? Naruto had listened closely to Deva's every word. He had had no reason to believe any of it was a lie. It all felt like it was spoken from the heart. He couldn't explain it, but it seemed like Deva almost shunned logic in place of his beliefs. Naruto liked that. It was a sign of someone who had true faith in themselves. But then again, Deva also seemed to have an absolute devotion to his ideals, and considering what those were, what lengths would he go to realize them? In the end, there really only was one choice, even if it was a difficult one to make. Okay, Deva-san, I'll help you, he said, sitting back. Deva looked at him for several moments, analyzing his words and face before nodding. Thank you. He replied, looking ahead once more, understand the weight of the trust I am putting in you. There is only one member of Akatsuki who knows my name. So I'm a member of Akatsuki now? Naruto asked, surprised to find himself placed so quickly. Deva slowly shook his head. No, you will not become a part of Akatsuki. He said, surprising Naruto further, I have another idea for you. Please come with me. Deva got to his feet, heading back into the room behind. Naruto raised his brow before following him, wondering what on earth he was planning. Deva opened the doors and walked out into the hall, immediately heading down the left side. Naruto closed the doors behind him before hurrying to catch up with Deva. They didn't stop as they reached the doorway Deva was heading towards. They walked straight through it and into another stairwell. Unlike before, however, these spiraled downwards, round stone walls and black metal stairs. Naruto was starting to wonder if maybe there was more to Deva than just a philosophy about pain. They exited the staircase after descending just a single floor and walked out into a hall almost identical to the one above, except there were many doors on this floor, compared to the few on the one above. Deva guided Naruto to a door on the opposite wall, third from the right. From this side, the door was no different from the others, but Deva stopped outside it as if it had some special meaning, turning to Naruto. This room shall be yours for as long as you stay in Aimgakure, he said, looking down to Naruto. If the decor is not to your liking, you may change it as you see fit. Someone will be sent tomorrow to see about that. Inside, you will find some of the most important things you will be needing. I'm getting a room, Naruto asked in surprise before his expression turned to one of exasperation. So I'm gonna have to climb all those stairs just to get to sleep at night. That won't be necessary. Deva replied, there is a Shunshin scroll. Sign it with your blood and you will be able to use the Shunshin no Jutsu to transport yourself to that position, once you have mastered the Shunshin, that is. So until I do that, I have to take the stairs, Naruto said in a defeated tone. On that note, I shall be sending someone to meet you soon. Deva replied, he is a subordinate of mine and he is under orders to provide you with training. Wait a minute, I'm gonna get training, Naruto exclaimed excitedly. He had thought he would need to beg and plead to be trained, but here he was having it given to him. He almost wanted to sing. Almost. Of course. Deva replied, your role shall be a dangerous one. You will need to become an incredibly powerful shinobi if our goals are to be realized. In fact, it will be our goal to make you one of the most powerful shinobi alive. Naruto stared up at Deva, awestruck at the prospect. Deva bowed his head before walking past Naruto and returning to the staircase. Naruto watched as he left. As soon as he was gone, he reached out for his door handle and quickly opened it, stepping inside his room. Whoa! He breathed as he looked around. The room was decorated like the room above, stone walls and wooden floors. He also had a wide window, but this one was a proper window. Light shone in from it, lighting up the furniture in his room. At the left side in the corner, Naruto had been given a king-size bed. A king-size. Opposite the bed was a tall mahogany wardrobe with brass doorknobs on it. In front of Naruto on the right was a pretty large trunk, green with brown straps and bronze borders. And next to that was a dressing table with a tall mirror that almost reached the ceiling. And on the dressing table was... No way! Naruto breathed, rushing over and pushing the wooden chair aside. He stared in awe at the forehead protector laid out before him, the black fabric and the 4 thin lines on the metal, marked with a 5th that scored neatly through them. Naruto immediately reached up and removed his goggles, placing them aside and lifting the forehead protector to its intended place. He hastily tied it, not even blinking as he surveyed himself in the mirror. He couldn't wipe the grin from his face. This was so awesome. He actually had a forehead protector. It may not have been Konoha's like he had planned, but it was incredible nonetheless. He quickly whipped his head around the room, trying to see what else there was to find. He dropped to his knees and opened the trunk, his eyes glistening at what he saw inside. There were scrolls, ink sets, brushes, all the basic tools for sealing. There were also more unorthodox items, like ninja tools that weren't standard issue. There were reels of razor wire, retractable blades, unmarked paper tags, and things Naruto had never even seen before. He grinned broadly as he got to his feet and rushed to his wardrobe, throwing the doors open. This time he couldn't even bring himself to word his awe. Inside the wardrobe, his clothes were hung up, dry and pressed. They were hung so that they looked like they were being worn, meaning that the jacket was hanging from the top, with the pants hanging just below the waist of the jacket. But it was what was around that jacket that caught Naruto's eye. He reached up and tossed his clothes onto the bed before reaching up for that. It was a beautiful cloak, crimson, with a design like water moving through it. The entire thing looked like a Red Sea, with thousands of tiny waves pouring through it, forming intricate lines that ebbed and flowed through the material magnificently. And on the back, placed with pride and honor, was the red spiral that also lay on Naruto's jacket, the one he had always had. This cloak. He wasn't sure which was greater, it or the forehead protector. Whichever it was, Naruto considered both of them to be his most valued possessions from here on out. His look of wonder was then disturbed as he heard a knock at the door, his door. He delicately laid the cloak down on his bed, showing it much greater care than he did for his clothes. He then walked over to the door and opened it. But when he did, he was met with a black wall. Naruto sounded, slowly looking up. Before him stood a tall, impossibly tall man. He wore the cloak of the Akatsuki, just like Zetsu and Deva. But he also wore a sedge hat, and from this angle, Naruto could not make out his face. Uzumaki Naruto. The man asked, slowly looking down, "It is a pleasure to meet you. You may call me Hoshigaki Kasame." Naruto stared up at the giant in front of him. His head passed even the door frame, he was so tall. Upon comparison, Naruto just about made it to this guy's stomach, which made him feel even shorter. But it wasn't his height which drew Naruto's attention. Incredible though it may be, it was the person's face. His skin was a pale shade of blue, almost gray. He had very small eyes, which appeared to be locking on to whatever they were looking at. He had 3 markings under each eye, similar to the markings on Naruto's face, but these bent in the middle like a wide V. And there was no doubt he was strong. Even the muscles on his face were tight, leaving the structure of his skull very visible in an almost gaunt manner. He removed the sedge hat he wore, revealing that his hair was also blue but a much darker shade. It also sat in tall spikes, supported by the unusually thick strap of his forehead protector, which seemed more like a headpiece than a headband. He surveyed Naruto with a wide grin, revealing his teeth to be sharpened to a point. Overall, he had a very ferocious appearance, and he seemed to know it. "Hashigaki Kasame," Naruto repeated, his brow raised. "You're my sensei." Kasame's smirk widened at Naruto's lack of fear, obviously impressed with the boy's courage. "So I don't frighten you?" he asked rhetorically. Well, aren't we brave?" Zetsu-san looked stranger. Naruto commented, "Give me a second, I just need to get changed." Kasame's brow rose as the door was slammed in his face. It had been a very long time since someone had had the audaciousness do something like that. He would have to make sure Naruto learned to never do something like that again. He straightened himself up again as he waited for Naruto to get ready. He had already intended on giving him a tough time with his training, but now it was going to be murder. He grinned to himself as he removed a large, wrapped object from his back. It had a long yellow handle with a skull on the end. He placed the tip on the ground and leant on it, his forearm resting atop the skull. He could hear grunts and rustling noises from the other side of the door. What the hell was that brat doing? "Would you hurry it up in there?" Kasame demanded with an annoyed expression on his face. The noises soon came to a stop, and Kasame raised his brow as the door opened. Naruto stood proudly in his own clothes, his pockets and any other available openings irresponsibly stuffed with ninja tools. Kasame narrowed his right eye as he gave Naruto a skeptical look. "What is your ninja rank?" he asked, a feeling of dread rising in his gut. "Huh, ninja rank." Naruto repeated, confused. "Well, I guess with this thing I'm a genin, huh?" Right at that very moment, Kasame could have killed Naruto. The object in his hand was reaching out for Naruto's chakra greedily. He could feel it. But it was that very same reason why Kasame resisted his urge and lowered his head to Naruto's annoyingly low level. "So what you are really saying is that you are nothing more than a lowly academy student?" he asked with forced calmness. "In that case." He reached out with his hand and gripped Naruto's forehead protector between his purple fingernails. He then pulled it off, almost tearing Naruto's hair out in the process. "Ow!" Naruto complained, rubbing his head. "What the hell, give me my headband." "If you have not passed the graduation exam, then you are not even a ninja," Kasame replied, straightening up. "As such, it will be up to me to decide when you are worthy of this. And remember, I was trained in Kirigakure, not Konohagakure. Now take those useless things out of your pockets and get a move on." Naruto jumped back from shock, hastily pulling the scrolls and other tools from his pockets and everywhere else before dropping them into the open trunk. Zetsu was okay, but it looked like in Kasame's case his appearance did match his personality. He quickly left his room and closed the door as Kasame walked off with Naruto's headband gripped in his hand. He had replaced his item on his back and headed towards the door. "Oh man, not the stairs." Naruto complained, but quietly in case Kasame turned on him again. "No, not the stairs." Kasame replied with a wry grin. He walked over to the window and opened it, leaning out. Then for some reason he frowned. He glanced back to Naruto, gesturing for him to come closer. Naruto complied, standing beside Kasame and trying to see whatever it was that had caught the giant's eye. "Idiot!" Kasame smirked, pushing Naruto out of the window. "Wah!" Naruto exclaimed, "WHAA. Will you shut up?" Kasame grunted as he grabbed Naruto in mid. They both plummeted down the ground, many stories below. Kasame had his arm covering Naruto's mouth, which was the only thing suppressing his yells. It was one thing when it was Zetsu, but this guy might actually let go. The air blasted up Naruto's jacket, sending freezing waves across his spine. His collar had been lifted up past his face, completely obscuring his vision. That made things a little easier, at least he couldn't see the ground. But the sound the air made as it rushed past his ears was almost like the wind was screaming at him. Suddenly, Naruto felt himself being jerked back as Kasame pulled himself onto the wall of the building, before kicking off it and leaping to another building. Gripping the back of the boy's jacket, he hopped from building to building, with Naruto getting thrown limply around in the process. He was too dazed to even recognize what was going on. He felt his stomach churn uneasily, threatening to shrink away in fear. And there was only one way his stomach was going to reduce in size. I'm gonna hurl, he thought as he suddenly started falling again. But this fall lasted longer and ended with Kasame lowering him onto the ground, feeling incredibly dizzy. His collar fell back down into place, and from what he could make out, they were on the outskirts of the village. It looked like they were standing in a long passage. Stone walls were behind them with the buildings on upper tiers. This must be one of the lower levels then. Thick pipes ran periodically through the ground, opening up and spilling water out into what seemed to be a moat around the village. Naruto leaned against the iron pipe railing, trying his best to look disinterested while trying even harder to keep his stomach settled. That was quite a trip, and he was still freezing. Okay, now show me what you can do, Kasame ordered, folding his arms. Naruto looked up, blinking drearily. He then straightened up and turned to Kasame, trying to recall a certain something. Okay, he said, forming his hands into two single seals and forming a cross with his fore and middle fingers, Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A huge puff of smoke came into existence behind them, soon clearing away to reveal something incredible. From nowhere, there was now over 100 Narutos grinning at the original and Kasame. They were all perfect copies, and each of them stood proudly as they faced the two real people for about a fraction of a second. Then they all dropped into the water. Gah! Came over 100 cries. The shock immediately dispelled them, leaving Naruto blinking in surprise with a massive wall of smoke behind him. Whoa, that was weird, he muttered. Baka. Kasame growled, once again feeling the urge to tickle Naruto's brain with his fist. How can you expect to take out your opponent when you don't even have the sense to position your clones? Sorry, Naruto replied, raising his hands in surrender. That's the first time I've used that jutsu. Kasame backed off, a little genuine surprise on his face. He glanced back out to the water, his brow raised. He summoned that many clones on his first try. He thought incredulously before grinning, in that case, I think I now understand why she chose me. Very well then, stupid though you may be, you seem to be skilled at throwing your chakra around, he said, looking at Naruto with a smile that revealed all his teeth. But just how much control do you have? Control? Naruto repeated with a confused expression. Kasame nodded before jerking his thumb to the next level up. Naruto glanced in that direction and saw to his surprise that his headband was tied to a railing up there. I want you to get that for me, Kasame said, folding his arms. Scale the wall without your hands. How do I do that? Naruto asked as he tried to picture it. He failed. Kasame sighed, lowering his head a little. Channel your chakra to your feet, he explained without hiding his annoyance. Too much and you'll throw yourself off, too little and you'll fall on your ass. Naruto looked away from Kasame, returning his gaze to the headband up there. Channel his chakra to his feet. What the hell? He formed a seal and did as he was told. He found his chakra and willed it to flow down to his feet. He felt it reach that place and opened his eyes. He looked at the wall and pressed a foot against it. But it didn't stick, it just felt like he was kicking a wall. He looked at Kasame questioningly, surprised to see him so close. Watch, he said, forming an unnecessary hand sign. Naruto looked down at Kasame's feet and saw the dust on the ground billow away as the chakra was gathered. He then just did it. He put his foot on the wall and hauled himself up to a horizontal position. He then walked up to the next level at a leisurely pace before hopping over the railing and leaning on it, looking down at Naruto. Now hurry it up, I don't want to spend all day on this, he said with a bored look. Give it a running start, it will help build momentum. Naruto looked up with a raised brow. He nodded before taking several steps back. He looked up and down the wall before taking a deep breath and forming his hand sign. This time he kept his eyes on his feet, watching until the dust was cast away like it had for Kasame. He furrowed his brow with concentration, adding more chakra until finally. There, Naruto grunted, breaking his seal and running at the wall. He reached about a meter before jumping and turning to a horizontal position. He felt his foot connect with the wall and reached out with his other one. He fell flat on his ass. For crying out loud! Kasame groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. Maintain the chakra, you moron. Naruto placed a hand on the wall as he got back to his feet. Back in the tower, when Kasame yelled at him, Naruto had really thought he was a monster. Now he also realized he was mean as well. He brushed dirt off his clothes, then returned to the starting point and formed his seal again. Okay, mold my chakra, he thought, with a look of deep focus on his face. Channel it to my feet and maintain it. It wasn't easy, but he was managing. He felt his chakra in his feet, keeping him attached to the ground in a way unlike gravity. Feeling certain he was able to maintain it now, he released the seal and ran at the wall, jumping at it and planting his foot on it. Yes, he thought as he felt it attach. He kept on going, running up the wall, but he had only managed it a few steps when he felt the chakra disappear and was forced to land. Damn it. He looked up at Kasame, expecting another reproachful comment. What he got instead was a grin and a nod. Again. He ordered, straightening to his full height. Naruto looked surprised, but he quickly nodded, returning to his position. He was suddenly hit with a new wave of confidence and found channeling his chakra to be easier this time. He was determined to master this by the end of the day. Interesting that you chose Kasame, Pain said, leaning against the wall. He stood in the hallway outside the room he usually inhabited, just by the door. The candles had just been lit as it was growing dark outside. They also provided warmth, a waste energy that was often exploited in this village. Most wouldn't believe him to be suited as an instructor. With his chakra levels, he is the best person for training a Jinchuriki. Conan replied, facing Pain. And his Kirigakure upbringing is just what is needed to rid Naruto-san of his Konoha ideals. I see, then it was a wise choice. Pain said, nodding. It would make things difficult if Naruto-san were to have a change of heart. However, I do not think they should be brought down completely. After all, if not for Konoha's ways, we would not be here. You almost sound glad of Konoha, Conan stated, but not in an accusing tone. Of course I am. Pain replied with no indication of taking offense. If not for Konoha, there would have been no reason for AIM to have been used as a battleground, and if that were the case, I would be a simple-minded human. Yes, but you would have been happy, Conan said, looking down. Pain studied her for several moments in silence. With this power, happiness is not my goal, he said, turning away and walking into his room. Conan didn't look up as he left. She couldn't bring herself to, but she then took a deep breath before turning and walking away. Naruto was sitting on the ground, panting heavily. He had managed to make decent progress in the time he'd been training. He could almost reach the bars of the railing above, but he couldn't quite make it. It was now pretty late. Noon had turned to dusk. Kasame watched with a bored expression as Naruto took a short break. Come on, Kasame said with his chin resting on his hand. It's freezing out there and I'm in no rush. We'll come back tomorrow and finish this then. He straightened up and turned away and began walking off. No can do, Naruto said, getting to his feet. That took Kasame by surprise had he outright refused him. I don't know my way around yet, so the only way I'm following is if I get up there. Kasame cocked a brow before grinning. He turned back to face Naruto, folding his arms. All right then, last chance, he said. If you can get this, I'll consider giving you special training. Naruto's eyes widened at the thought. Special training, that was the whole reason he had come here. The waves of chakra pulsating from Kasame, not to mention that huge object on his back, there was no doubting his strength. If Naruto could do this now, he would that much closer to becoming a powerful shinobi. All right then, I can't mess this up, he thought, wiping sweat from his brow. Everything's riding on this. I can't afford to fail. The determination on his face impressed Kasame. He hadn't seen a look like that in years. He raised his hand to his chin, studying Naruto thoughtfully. What's this? He thought. It looks like he's really going to give this his all. Naruto formed his hand sign, his expression not receding in the slightest. Gathering the chakra to his feet was so simple now, he almost felt like he didn't need the hand sign. But he wasn't going to take the risk of trying something he didn't know would work. Well, that wasn't entirely true. With the chakra in place, he was ready to go. But he decided to try something else, something that might give him an edge. He hopped in the air, landing on the railing behind. His feet had barely made contact, however, before he bent his knees and kicked off, propelling himself forward. He sprinted across the ground, his momentum even greater than if he just ran. He didn't waste time jumping. He continued running even as he reached the wall, making sure his final acknowledgement of gravity was a large step that took him onto the wall. Keeping his speed, he then continued to run up the wall, heading straight for his forehead protector. Damn, he could feel the chakra fading away. Each step was becoming harder to maintain, but he was so close he couldn't give in now. Come on, he thought, just a little more. He reached out with his hand, but remembered Kasame's words that he was to do so without them. It wasn't painful, but the strain was immense. He pounded the next few feet out and actually managed to reach the railing. Yes, Naruto cried, grabbing on and vaulting over. He landed on the other side, breathing heavily but overjoyed. He had done it. He had actually done it. Kasame took a couple of steps toward Naruto, grinning broadly. "Not bad, kid, but you've still got a long way to go," he muttered, shaking his head. Naruto didn't hear him. Blood was pounding through his ears, his heartbeat the only audible sound aside from his breaths. He placed a hand on his knee and pushed himself to his feet. He then placed his hands on his back as he stretched, before turning around to retrieve his forehead protector. "Hey, where'd it?" he muttered, looking around. He then noticed that it was once again in the hand of Kasame, who was walking off casually. "Hey, what's the deal?" "What?" Kasame asked, looking back. "You don't seriously think that's enough to make me give you this, do you? There is more to being a shinobi than mere chakra control, you know." Naruto hung forward with an expression of complete exasperation. All that effort, and he didn't even get to have his forehead protector back. Kasame really was very mean. "Come on, it's late and we shall be rising early tomorrow," Kasame said as he made distance. Naruto shook his head before following. He caught up with Kasame and tried keeping pace. This monster took big steps. They walked into the shadows of the lower tiers of Aimgakure, where space took on a strange meaning. It still felt like they were outside. The air quality and temperature hadn't changed, yet they were surrounded by walls of pipes and the floor above. The sound of rushing water surrounded them. Rivers traveled their designated courses around the strange pair. Kasame smirked, although his reasons weren't obvious and Naruto wasn't about to ask. However, there was something he was curious about. "So what else do I need?" he asked, looking up at the peculiar-looking man. "You now have more skill with chakra control," he replied. "That means you now have the means of which to learn complicated jutsu. That is something for another time, however. I think the next area to focus on will be your speed and stealth. You put a lot of effort into that last run, yet it was embarrassingly slow. As for stealth, I can already confirm that you are about as subtle as an urchin in a buffet." Naruto huffed. He didn't think he was that bad. He'd always thought himself to be pretty fast, and he was usually pretty good at getting by unnoticed. Although upon reflection, it might not have been because of his skills that no one looked at him. He glanced back up at Kasame, who seemed to be in a pretty good mood for some reason. He didn't need to ask, however. Kasame caught him looking, and his grin widened. "I wonder if AIM has any decent medic nin," he said. "I believe I have your next training figured out. However, before we do that, there is one more chakra control jutsu you will need to learn." "What is it?" Naruto asked, raising his brow. "The walking on water jutsu," Kasame replied with a malicious smirk. Naruto barely made it through his door. He couldn't believe it, all that training, and he had to climb all those stairs as well. However, he figured that if he got a little more practice in with what he just learned, maybe he could head straight up here from outside, rather than what he had just done. He closed his door and flicked on the light switch to his right. 4 bulbs lit up, shining into each corner of the room like spotlights. Naruto dragged his feet as he walked, heading for the door between his bed and wardrobe. He hadn't paid it much attention earlier, but now that he was in this state, a simple thing like that was the only kind of activity he could bring himself to do. He reached the door, and just before opening it, he noticed that the cloak was still on his bed. He would make sure to return that to the wardrobe in a minute. When he wore that, he wanted to be acknowledged as a full-fledged shinobi. He pushed forward, and the door obeyed, opening into darkness. Naruto tapped the wall with his palm until he found what he was looking for. The lights came on. To Naruto's surprise, it wasn't a fluorescent light like he had expected, but a long strip along the wall on his side, consisting of 6 more spotlights which shone to the opposite wall, where the countertops and appliances were located. The room was a shining white, immaculate linoleum floors and tiled walls with pristine countertops and a magnificent fridge, all of them gleaming with cleanliness. It really pissed Naruto off. Not only was it too bright, but it was going to be murder keeping this place looking clean. He doubted Deva would be providing maid services as well. That would be a bit too much to expect. He reached out again and turned, thankful that this room had a dimmer instead of a simple switch like his bedroom. He toned down the lights and stepped inside, closing the door behind him. It looked like the countertops ran all across the opposite side of the room and along the wall to Naruto's right. Behind the door, 3 tall metal chairs sat, facing the window. The fridge was directly in front of him with 2 empty counters on the left. Then there was the cooker with the sink next to it. The kitchen was fairly small, but the converted counters to the right provided an eating area that meant there really was plenty of room to move around, as long as Naruto was just in here by himself. He walked over to the fridge, opening it and inspecting the contents. He may have lucked out with the cloak and stuff, but in here things were pretty plain. Milk and sandwich fillings mostly, with vegetables and other stuff. It was almost ordinary, except what ordinary person would put such ordinary stuff in their fridge. Naruto sighed, closing it and turning to his left. It looked like there was one more door there, probably the final place in his self-given tour. He looked in and saw just what he expected. This was the bathroom, judging by the toilet, sink, and shower. He could be mistaken, however. He stepped in and turned the light on, this time by a cord. The tiled floors were a plain blue, and the walls were also tiled, but in various shades of blue placed in a random pattern. The toilet was directly opposite the door, not unusual, and was a typical white, as was the sink. The shower, however, was a more impressive sight. It was a cubicle with opaque glass that reached from floor to ceiling, hiding anything below the collar of anyone who would be using it. The shower head was placed in the corner, hanging over the center like a curious spectator. Just left of the shower was a silver radiator with a blue towel hanging over it, ready for use. And between the radiator and sink was a strange-looking drawer. Naruto observed it and noticed the engraved writing stating laundry. That surprised Naruto. It looked like there was a better service going on here than he expected. Ha-ha-ya! He yawned, stretching. He was more than a little exhausted, but if Kisame really intended on training him early, now was probably the best time to take a shower. Weird, I'm miles away from Konoha, but I don't feel strange at all. Kisame was sitting in a bar, looking out into the street as he idly held his drink in his hand. The place was pretty quiet. It was nearing closing time, but the barman didn't have the courage to tell Kisame that. As it was, that meant there were only 3 people in the bar. How long do you expect to be here? This kid's an idiot. It will probably be a while. Kisame relied without looking, but he does have a lot of determination for such a runt. This may be enjoyable. I see. What was it Leader-sama told you of this? It wasn't he, it was his second in command, Conan. I think her name was. Kisame said, noticing the other person's nod of agreement. She just said I was to train the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. I gotta say, I was surprised. I thought we were gonna seal them, not raise them as pets. Then it would appear the situation has changed. Yeah, just beneath the surface. I think I got it, Naruto called out, holding his arms out for balance. I should warn you, if you fail, you will lose a lot of blood, Kisame warned. They had returned to the same place they had trained before, because it was out of the way and no one was around. Kisame had spent the entire morning teaching Naruto the walking on water jutsu, which Naruto had found to be a lot more difficult than what he learned yesterday. Now Naruto stood atop the water, looking around himself uncertainly while adjusting the leather strap Kisame had given him. It had 5 pouches in it, but all were empty. It was a little heavy, but nothing compared to his clothes and hair, which were dripping wet and weighing him down considerably. Several yards in front of him, Kisame stood with his back to aim, having no trouble standing on the water. There was no wind today, the air was still. Naruto was glad of that, he was freezing as it was. Give me a minute. Naruto replied, his nerve failing him a little. He raised his left foot, testing his balance before doing the same with the other. When both feet were on the water again, he paused for several seconds before nodding and uncertainly lowering his arms. Okay, I'm ready. Kisame nodded slowly before raising his hands. He then placed both his palms together before lowering one onto the water's surface. Suten, Gasho Kyuzame, he called, placing his hand on top of the water. All Naruto saw was a large ripple cast across the surface, but there was no signs to reveal what Kisame's jutsu really was. Now then, your objective is to retrieve the 5 scrolls from those posts, making as little impact on the water as possible. They will sense your vibrations. The stronger they sense, the faster and fiercer they will attack. And no jutsu. Naruto raised his brow, looking down at the water in the hope he would spot what Kisame was talking about. Below the surface, he could see some shadows moving, seeing only enough to make one assumption. They were large. He then glanced behind him. In random positions, placed with at least 5 meters distance between each other, there were 5 posts with scrolls standing vertically atop them. He could see that not only that, but there were also numbers marking them, 1 to 5. He had to take each scroll in order then, which made things even more difficult. He looked back down to the water. Although there was no breeze, the pipes were still pouring the gathered rain out, so there was a constant ripple coming from those points. That was something at least. If whatever was below their cloud sense vibrations, they'd be pretty confused by the disturbance. Naruto looked back up, turning around to face the scrolls. The water behind him erupted. Naruto barely had time to avoid as something crashed through the spot he had been barely a second ago. But his movement had only caused worse ripples, and he could visibly see the shadows darting at him at incredible speeds. In no time, he was avoiding wave after wave of thrashing attacks coming from whatever lurked in the depths. He was forced to run across the water, zigzagging as he dodged the missile-like things. What the hell is going on? He thought as he leapt into the air and spun around. His eyes widened in shock as he realized what was preying him. He looked at Kasame incredulously. Sharks, are you serious? Why should I go easy on you? Kasame asked. Your opponent won't. Naruto landed back on the water, only to have to jump up again as a shark attacked from below. Upon closer inspection, the shark seemed to be made of water. That meant conventional attacks wouldn't work. However, Naruto didn't know that. He was soon to learn, though, when he tried attacking one with a kunai. Needless to say, it wasn't a great idea. His slash cut through the shark's body, but it soon restored itself with the surrounding water and whipped around at Naruto. Damn it. He thought as he lunged to his left. The shark fell below the water again, but the others were converging on Naruto's position. You're only making this harder on yourself. Kasame called. You're only going to get yourself killed. Naruto's eyes widened as suddenly all 5 sharks attacked at once, lunging at him viciously. It turned out for the better, however, as the shock of the attack broke Naruto's concentration and he fell below the water's surface. Subsequently, the sharks crashed into each other, exploding in a burst of water. Naruto used his chakra to propel himself back to the surface where he jumped into the air and cheered. Yeah, I did it, he cried, punching the air. Suten, Gasho Kyuzame. Kasame called, placing his hand back onto the water. You've done nothing, idiot. Naruto landed on the water just before the first shark was summoned. As such, it didn't notice the vibrations he made. This gave Naruto the opportunity to rest and figure out what to do next. You have failed to retrieve a single scroll. Kasame said, annoyed, now quit messing around and get moving. Naruto looked around, making sure not to cause any movement large enough to attract the sharks. He wasn't far from one of the posts, maybe 10 yards. That was fine. It looked like he had an opportunity then. All that he required was the preparation to do what he needed. But for that, he would need room to move. Let's see, he thought. I can't use my cage bunshin, so I can't distract them. I can't just run for it either. They can attack from any direction. Naruto's lips spread into a grin, of course. He knew exactly what to do. Slowly, so not to alert his pursuers, he reached for his weapon's pouch. He opened it delicately and drew out a kunai. He gripped it in his hand tightly, looking around for the best spot to make his first move. He made his decision and slowly bent his knees before leaping into the air. He spun to his left and threw his kunai as far as he could, the little paper seal fluttering as it was dragged along. The metal blade soared through the air, heading for the water as it slowly descended. Just before impact, however, the paper ignited before releasing an explosion in the water. Immediately, the sharks rushed to that position, and Naruto was given his opening. He pulled out something else, a specially made item he'd taken from his trunk that morning. He then hurled it at the nearest post, the thin metal blade piercing the wood. He then pulled on the metal wire in his other hand, causing 3 arms to spike out from the grappling hook and dig into the post. In that same move, he also pulled himself through the air toward that very same wooden pillar, before grabbing it with his hand and planting both his feet on it. He dropped the wire and grabbed the first scroll, placing it inside one of the pouches of the strap. Got one, he thought, giving a bestial smirk that showed all his teeth. He then looked out, scanning the posts for the scroll marked number 2. It was the second furthest away out of the 4 remaining scrolls. Naruto looked around as he planned his next move. The sharks had recuperated from the explosion and were now searching for him again. Kasame grinned as he watched his student analyze the situation. It looked like he wasn't really the idiot he pretended to be. Well, what do you know? He thought, now he's my student. Naruto looked around with a creased brow, finally deciding on his strategy. He had been lucky to avoid getting hit by the sharks, but he wasn't going to test his luck again. He pulled himself onto the post, standing atop it as he visualized. The purpose of this lesson was stealth, which meant he had to get through this unnoticed. He imagined a change in environment. He was in the garret of a manor, with 5 targets which he had to assassinate in a specific order. The positions he had to reach were the places he would need to set traps to take out the sleeping objectives. However, the manor was old and the floorboards creaked at the slightest feeling of pressure. If such a noise were to come into existence, the keen guards below would attack and risk alerting the targets. He had already used a distraction at great risk. He could have knocked one of the scrolls over with that explosion, and so such a trick wouldn't work a second time. So what should he do? I have to take the scrolls in order, he thought, but that doesn't mean I have to reach them in order. He crouched down on the post, fixing his eyes onto the nearest one. He glanced down to the water. The sharks were at a distance, since they only had a vague idea of where he was. He then locked his eyes on his target again before propelling himself off the post, using his chakra for a boost. He had barely removed himself when suddenly one of the sharks attacked the post, shattering it in its jaws. "Did I forget to mention?" Kisame asked, smirking. Naruto grabbed onto the next post, grinding his teeth in annoyance as he saw his grappling hook sink into the depths. He had only been given one, and had quite liked it. Still, at least it was his hook and not his leg that had been a close call. So empty posts get destroyed, huh? He thought, as he swung around to gain momentum for his next leap. Guess that does make things more difficult. He bounded to the next post, then immediately pushed past and kicked off it, heading for the one with the scroll he was seeking. As he flew through the air, he looked down into the water, watching tensely as a shadow passed underneath him. He grabbed the post and pulled himself up again, taking the second scroll. 2 down, 3 to go, he thought as he placed the scroll in its pouch. It appears Kasame-san intends to make Naruto-san's training as difficult as possible. Pain said as he watched the minute orange form from his position. It would almost seem like he really wants to see Naruto-san badly injured. He is succeeding so far. Conan replied, standing behind Pain in the mouth of the monument. If he can complete his training under these conditions, he'll grow even faster than anyone else in his age group. Yes, we need him to grow strong quickly. The Chunin exams will be held in Konoha in a couple of months. I wonder if he should be entered in it. Conan frowned at Pain. Was he seriously considering such a thing? If the Naruto-san sets foot in Konoha, they will do everything in their power to capture him. She replied, and 2 months isn't long enough to completely detach him from that place. If he turns back to Konoha, he will have information on both of us, as well as Kasame-san and Zetsu-san. Pain nodded, allowing a small smile he almost never did. Of course, I was simply dreaming idly. He said, however, the Chunin exams represent the progression of a ninja's skills. I believe we will have to pay strict attention to Naruto's training. He must become as strong as any member of Akatsuki, and with only 4 years to do so, that will not be simple. We should use the Chunin exams as a marker for his progress. He must equal that level in 2 months. This time, Conan's brow rose. 2 months was nowhere near enough time for a new genin to reach Chunin level, especially in Naruto's case. Pain glanced back at her, giving a small nod. She understood and left without a word. Pain looked back to Naruto, who had just reached another scroll. However, perhaps Kasame-san is taking this too far. Naruto's breathing was heavier now. This was getting really difficult. He now had just a single scroll left to retrieve, and it was at the farthest away position. All the other posts had been destroyed the moment Naruto had removed himself from them, and now he was facing the greatest distance. It appeared the posts' positions weren't so random after all. What's more, the sharks had all gathered between the 2 points, swimming in circles as though waited for any signs of movement. Naruto's head whipped around the area. There was nothing to give him any ideas on how to get to his last scroll. It was obvious to him now that Kasame was still controlling the sharks, but just to an extent. He was sure that if he tried an explosive tag again, it wouldn't work. Aside from that, all he had were kunai and shuriken, nothing else to help him get through this. He blinked in surprise. Looking up, he realized that it had started raining. Tiny droplets fell from the sky, soon turning into a thick wall of water dropping from the clouds above. Naruto looked around. It was so thick he couldn't even see Kasame anymore. All that was in sight was him and the scroll. He looked down to the water, his brow rising. The rain was confusing the sharks. They were all over the place, trying desperately to find Naruto. That meant Kasame couldn't see him. This was his chance. Naruto dashed off the post, sprinting to the final scroll. All around him, the sharks were darting. Every now and then they would lunge through the air, but never getting it right. They did, however, get close enough to force Naruto to change direction. But he was in the clear now. The scroll was almost in his. Suddenly, a shark burst out of the water, smashing through the post and sending the scroll flying. Naruto's eyes widened as it neared the water. If it fell down there, he would have no chance. However, as fortune or perhaps coincidence would have it, the very shark that destroyed the post fell back into the water, the impact of which burst water into the air and sent the scroll high above, spinning like a pinwheel. Naruto jumped into the air and grabbed it, quickly placing it in the correct pouch. He landed on the water, looking around for the sharks once more, but they were all gone. It was just Naruto out there. Well, almost. Well done. Kasame said as he walked towards Naruto, all 5 and not a scratch on you. I have to admit I'm impressed. Just promise you won't give me something like that again. Naruto replied, placing his hands on his knees as he took a short rest. Kisame grinned as he reached Naruto, looking down at him. I could make a promise, but I won't necessarily keep it. He said, I think there's just one more test I need to see before you can have your forehead protector. Naruto straightened up, which wasn't easy considering the weight of the water on his clothes. It was freezing before, now he was going numb. What's that? He asked, suddenly having the desire to be in his room. Tomorrow. Kisame replied, turning away. For now, you should get something dry on. You'll catch your death out here. Haha, very funny. Naruto huffed as he and Kisame walked away. Naruto lifted the zip of his pullover, tightening it to its limit. He had dried himself of and changed into the clothes given to him upon his arrival. He checked himself out in the mirror, then glanced down a little. He hadn't worn his goggles since yesterday. He'd completely forgotten about them. He shrugged. He wasn't planning on going anywhere anyway. It was still raining heavily. He glanced off to his right as he suddenly noticed the temperature drop. It sounded like it was coming from the hall. The sound of rain was a little louder out there. He walked over to the door and opened it, looking outside. Someone was leaning through the open window at the left end of the hall. Naruto raised his brow. The person was wearing the Akatsuki's cloak, but Naruto couldn't make out who it was. However, there was no doubt about the person being Zetsu or Kisame, not with that shape. It looked like a woman by how the cloak fitted her. That surprised Naruto how many members of Akatsuki were there, and were all of them here. The woman turned around as she realized she was being watched. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw her. She was very beautiful. Her deep blue hair, amber eyes, and lip piercing certainly made her an individual. He had never seen anyone quite like her. However, from her expression, she also seemed rather stoic. She looked at Naruto in the same way she would an inanimate object. You are Uzumaki Naruto? She asked, taking Naruto by surprise. Yeah. He replied as he closed his door behind him. The woman gave a slight nod before turning back to the window and leaning on the sill. Naruto stared at her back. It was a strange sort of meeting. But he couldn't just go back into his apartment, and he definitely didn't want to go back to those hellish stairs, so he decided to join her. She glanced out the corner of her eye as she saw him lean next to her, but said nothing. So, do you like the rain or something? Naruto asked, making a weak attempt at conversation. The woman didn't reply, nor did she even look at Naruto. He decided that was a pretty lame question to ask, and figured he should try something that might matter. Do you work with the others? I am Deva's partner. She replied simply, partner. Naruto repeated with a raised brow, you mean you're... That I work closely with him, she said before Naruto could say something stupid. Oh, right. Naruto muttered, realizing he was making himself look like an idiot. He's a pretty cool guy. The woman raised a brow at this. Deva had been called many things, but never a pretty cool guy. So if you work with him, does that mean you two are close? Naruto asked, looking up at her. You both have that same look, you know. The woman dismissed this. It was a fairly banal assumption to make. Kinda like you wanna smile but can't. This time the woman looked right at Naruto. What was that? Naruto looked back up at her, smiling himself. He was talking to me about the things he wanted to do. He explained, and you could sort of see it, like there was something in there that couldn't quite make it through. The woman was taken by surprise by this idea. How could he have come to a conclusion from having only met Deva once? She backed up a little as Naruto cocked his head at her, giving a sweet smile that made her a little uncomfortable. So what's your name? He asked with innocent curiosity. The woman blinked at it. Was this what Kisame was having to deal with? It's Conan, she replied, settling down. Conan, Naruto repeated, blinking. It was an unusual name, but not a bad one. Wow, that's another thing you and Deva got in common. You both have really cool names. Conan resisted the urge to sigh. She knew that in time, this kid could really wear her down. She looked out the window again, finding it easier than seeing the way he looked at her in such a strangely familiar way. Naruto did the same, watching as the rain fell down. So are you a missing nin as well? He asked. I saw Kasama-sensei's forehead protector. I know he's one. No, I am like you. I never officially became a ninja. Conan replied. Deva started Akatsuki here, but neither of us come from this place. You two are pretty close, huh? What makes you say that? You just call him Deva. Conan closed her eyes for a moment. He came of as an idiot, but it seemed Naruto was actually quite sharp at times. She opened them again, giving a slight nod. Yes, we grew up together, she said, deciding the pretense was pointless. Really? Naruto asked, his smile dropping to a small one. You're pretty lucky. Conan looked again at Naruto. How did he come up with this stuff? Naruto-sama. The two of them looked back. A man stood wearing a baggy shirt and jeans. He had a pretty kind face and fair brown hair. Conan recognized him, but it took the paint stains on his clothes for Naruto to realize who he was. I hope I'll see you later, Naruto said as he backed away from Conan. Yeah. Conan replied as he opened his door and let the decorator in. He smiled and waved just before he disappeared from sight. But even after he was gone, Conan found herself still watching the spot he had been. That was certainly a strange encounter, but not really an unpleasant one. She straightened up, her expression not quite stoic, more like it didn't know what to make of itself. Lucky, she repeated in a quiet voice. A light breeze blew over the resting dunes, sending a small mist of sand over the hills and off to the horizon. The dry desert offered little sanctuary. Peace was found only by the cold-blooded in such a place. The sun had set, the temperature had dropped dramatically. The full moon rose over the horizon, looking much larger when compared to the uneven hills of deep beige. The desert was unforgiving by day and uncaring by night. Apathy seemed to fill the air, added with a scent of malcontent. But it was a rare sort of calmness which was evoked only in the complete solitude the desert provided. Yet at the same time, it was despairing. There was nothing here. The empty horizons held more than anything close by. It was the perfect place for someone who truly knew what loneliness meant. However, in this situation, those words did not apply. After all, for loneliness to exist, it requires someone to be alone, which in this case wasn't true. Get out here, ordered a hoarse, raspy voice. From the sands rose a gray column, the moonlight discoloring it almost completely. The column then split apart, revealing what appeared to be an erratic tear, making it appear like a set of jaws. As they separated, a head was revealed, followed by the upper half of a torso. The person inside was rather strange-looking, white as the moon on one side, black as the night on the other. He surveyed the creator of the long shadow cat beside him with amusement. For you to have noticed us, your perception is commendable. This desert holds no secrets for I, the voice replied. Now tell me why you are here before I kill you for intruding. How barbaric, we only wanted to make an offer to you. The shadow moved as its creator turned to face the newcomer. Why should I be interested in anything you have to offer? The voice asked. We can give you what you desire. The stranger replied, and if you like, we can break your loneliness. The shadow made no movements to signify the acknowledgement of the stranger's words. The creator seemed to stand completely still, but something did change. Something large and shapeless grew from the shadow's shoulder, like the tail of a monster. The stranger frowned. This wasn't going as expected. Naruto left his room, now back in his ninja clothes as he now saw them. The decorators arrived just as he was about to close the door. The guy from last night, Ayumu, was there with two others, a gray bearded man in denim overalls and a young woman with brown hair tied back in a ponytail. They were each marked with paint stains. This obviously hadn't been their first call of the day. The old man seemed a little tired, which was no surprise considering the amount of stairs. The other two just had a little sweat on their brows, moistening the paint on their cheeks. Ayumu carried a couple of heavy-looking tins of paint. The woman held rollers and trays under her arms while the old man lifted a large pile of sheets in both arms. Naruto smiled and thanked them for what they were about to do, to which they modestly smiled back. It's no trouble. Ayumu replied, Aim's a big place, we get a lot of work in tall buildings. They waved as they walked into Naruto's room, Naruto returning it as he opened the window on the right side of the hall. After yesterday's training, walking on walls had become incredibly easy. It meant he now had a shortcut to taking the stairs. However, it was a different case when it was raining, which fortunately today it wasn't. He vaulted through the window and let himself fall for a few dozen meters before he gripped onto the wall and began running down. Pain watched Naruto's descent with faint interest. That boy had certainly grown accustomed to living in Aimgakure quickly. He was already eager to learn, just like any young academy student would be. How he could be so jovial, Pain couldn't understand. He considered maybe having another conversation with Naruto. He was quite an intriguing person. Pain wondered how someone from Konoha could be like that. I take it things didn't go as planned, he asked as he watched Naruto grow smaller. He is quite different from Naruto-san. Zetsu replied, he didn't even hear us out. I see, Pain muttered. So that is the difference between Suna and Konoha, is it? What would you have us do? Zetsu asked, smirking faintly. We tried to take him by force, but his defense is impressive. You attacked him? Pain asked, looking back at Zetsu expressionlessly. Zetsu, who didn't have Conan's experience with pain, read nothing from it. Then there is no choice. It must be Naruto-san who convinces him to join us. He will not listen to anyone from Akatsuki. Then shall we escort him? No, he is not ready for that yet. Pain replied, looking ahead again. We have 2 months with which to make our move. If he really is going to enter the Chunin exams, and if he is as you say he is, things will only be more difficult. We need Naruto to become that much stronger in a short amount of time. That is quite a goal. Zetsu said, are you sure he can manage such a thing? We will see. Naruto landed on the ground, where Kasame awaited him with his sedge hat on. Naruto walked up to him and looked up expectantly, before the two of them headed off in a direction different than the way they had gone for previous training. They walked through the thin streets, the tall buildings hiding the sunlight and keeping them in the shadows. People made way as the giant man and the short boy passed through, staring at the pair bewilderedly. The air was stuffy, the ventilation of the buildings poured steam and smoke into the street. It was really a pathetic scene. The place was filthy. Pages of old newspapers were stuck firmly to the ground, almost becoming part PF the gravel they walked across. Naruto looked around, wondering what they could be doing in such a barren place. Why are we here, Kasame-sensei? He asked, glancing up at the giant. This is the perfect place to conduct the final test. Kasame replied, taking amusement in being called sensei. I will need to see if you are capable of doing something that every shinobi must be prepared to do. Then, without warning, Kasame grabbed Naruto by the back of his jacket and threw him into an alleyway. Barely anyone showed any signs of concern as Naruto cried in shock. However, there was one person who took notice. The very person Naruto was thrown into and knocked to the ground. Let's see how you handle a life-or-death situation, Kasame said to himself as he continued on his way. Naruto placed his hands on the ground, pushing himself up. Ow, sorry, Mies, he began, but before he could finish, he was grabbed by the scruff of his neck and lifted into the air. Damn punk, growled a very large man. He wasn't as tall as Kasame, but he was quite a size. He was slightly overweight, with patches of sweat on his armpits and the small of his back. His rolled-back sleeves revealed very hairy arms, and his torn jeans suggested he'd thrown his considerable weight around on several occasions. And man, was that a mean-looking face. The stubble on his square jaw held weeks of dirt, and his broken nose was almost pressed against Naruto's. His thick brows were contorted with rage, and his beady eyes bored straight through Naruto's skull, giving him the appearance of a furious bull. His grip on Naruto's shirt tightened, and the boy struggled to break free. Hey, let me go. Naruto grunted as he gripped the man's beefy hand and tried to prise his stubby fingers away. The man responded by swinging his arm around and slamming Naruto into the alley wall. Naruto cried out in pain as a piece of jutting stone dug in between his shoulder blades, but the man didn't even blink. He reached back with his massive hand, which curled into a fist as he prepared himself to punch Naruto through the wall, imagining he could. Naruto grunted as the man's hand pressed hard against his chest, restricting his breathing. He raised his feet and pressed them against the man's fleshy chest, before pushing away in an attempt to free himself. But the man was stronger. He wasn't about to give in so easily. He tensed the muscles in his arm and swung his fist forward, straight for Naruto's face. Gah! Naruto yelled as he pumped chakra into his feet and kicked out. The man's beady eye widened in shock as he was knocked back into the opposite wall, his head striking the stone. Naruto fell to the ground, panting as he tried to catch his breath. He got to his feet, a hand on his knee for support. His back was killing him. That was definitely going to become a large bruise. Gore! The man groaned as he shook his head. He then clambered to his feet, giving Naruto an infuriated glare. He pulled from behind him a switchblade, the dull dagger revealing that it had been used often. He charged at Naruto, lashing out with his knife. Naruto dodged to the left, landing in a puddle of filth. Dirty water splashed onto his face, leaving traces of mud on his cheek. He quickly got to a crouched position as the man lunged at him again, putting all his weight into the attack. Naruto tried to dodge to the left again, but the man lashed out with his right hand, forcing Naruto to the other side and at the blade's tip. Naruto managed to avoid it for the most part, but received a cut across the forehead in the process. Ah! He cried as he was forced to the ground, the man leaning over him with his blade held high. Naruto quickly formed a hand sign, just as the man's grip on his weapon tightened. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The man looked up in surprise as a second Naruto charged at his raised arm, wrapping both of his own around it without stopping. The man was raised into the air a little, forced to a kneeling position. He raised his other hand to strike the second Naruto, when a third grabbed that arm and did the same as the second. A fourth Naruto then hopped over the original, delivering a kick that knocked the man onto his back. He'd barely struck the ground, however, when the fifth and final Naruto fell from the sky, driving his elbow into the man's gut. GWAH? The man cried, as all the air was forced out of his lungs. Naruto finished the move by getting to his feet, walking around the man and dropping a smoke pellet in his gaping mouth. The pellet burst and purple smoke poured from the fat maw, leaving the man gagging. Naruto walked out the alley where Kasame was waiting for him, leaning against the wall. "Not bad, little boy," he said, grinning. Naruto glared up at Kasame that had by far been the worst training yet. "Don't look at me like that. This is nothing compared to what I had to do." Naruto continued to glare, not saying a word to his cruel sensei. Kasame sighed, getting off the wall. "Can you imagine what it's like to have to kill your closest friends just to pass your graduation exam?" he asked. Naruto's brow shot up, his anger forgotten. "Are you serious?" "Very," Kasame replied, reaching into his cloak. "Well, I'd say you've about proven yourself. Here, use this to stem the bleeding." He handed Naruto his forehead protector, taking him by surprise. He held the shining plate in his hand, seeing the wound on his forehead clearly. He looked up at Kasame with wide eyes. "You mean I can wear this now?" he asked. "No, I'm recommending you wear it," Kasame replied. "Otherwise you will lose a lot of blood and probably die." Naruto blinked as he realized something warm was trickling down the side of his face. He hastily unzipped his jacket and tore a piece of his shirt off before pressing it against his wound. Kasame cocked a brow at this, to which Naruto grinned. "I don't want to get blood on it just yet," he explained. Kasame grinned, nodding. "That's quite some shinobi pride you have there," he said before jerking his head. "Come on, let's get that cleaned up." Naruto nodded, following Kasame back towards the tower. He wasn't sure if it was because of the blood loss or having his forehead protector back, but he was feeling surprisingly light at the moment, like if he jumped, he would jump higher than ever before. Kasame noticed this strange cheeriness. It was rather contagious. He himself was usually in a good mood after a fight, but this was different. It was like Naruto had completely forgotten about the test, and now the only thing he could focus on were the 5 lines on the metal in his hands. It wasn't quite the same, but if that experience had been so easily outshadowed by personal gain, then perhaps. "I may be reading too much into it," Kasame thought. "However, I wouldn't want that to go to waste. Maybe he can use it." Naruto walked along, smiling to himself with his hand pressed to his forehead, oblivious to Kasame's thoughts and intentions. If the two were to be compared, Naruto would seem to be very simple-minded. They left the urban disaster behind and headed towards the tower. Naruto didn't like thinking of it as a mortuary and did his best to ignore that fact. After all, who in their right minds would want to live in a place like that? Whenever he thought about it, he always told himself that the part he lived in wasn't a mortuary. A sit wasn't used as such. It made things a little easier, but hell if he was going to venture the halls in the dark. They climbed the wide stairs up to the tower and walked through the door. One of the receptionists saw Naruto and immediately hurried over with a first aid kit. "Please, Naruto-sama, let me clean that up for you," she said, as she led Naruto to the armchair in the lower left corner and sat him down. She opened the kit and pulled on a pair of rubber gloves before delicately peeling away the torn piece of fabric with her forefinger and thumb. She then removed the handkerchief from her blazer and placed it on the coffee table on her left, before putting the bloody piece of cloth atop it. She then took a piece of cotton wool and damped it with the contents of a small bottle before gently dabbing the cut. "It doesn't look so bad, just a nick." Naruto smiled at her, surprising the woman. She was usually treated considerately, but very rarely with genuine gratitude. She smiled back at him before continuing to clean off the blood on his face. She finished by applying a band-aid to the wound, and she was done. "There we go, all done," she said, packing up her equipment and getting to her feet. "Thank you," Naruto said, looking up at her. She smiled at him before returning to her post, removing the gloves. Kasame grinned at Naruto, who rejoined him. "Quite a charmer," he said as Naruto stood next to him. "One would almost forget how you got that cut." Naruto blinked, confused. He then looked down at his forehead protector before pressing it against the designated place and tying it. When he looked back up, he was grinning at Kasame, who returned it. "That actually suits you," he said. "You were born to be a shinobi." Naruto's grin broadened as he said that. It was definitely the sort of thing he liked to hear. Kisame looked up at the ceiling with a thoughtful look on his face. I doubt you have any Shunshin skills, he said, partially thinking aloud, but hell if I'm taking the stairs. Naruto blinked in surprise as Kisame took hold of his arm and made a seal with his right hand. Then he was hit with a rushing feeling as he was dragged at speeds impossible to make out. All color faded away, he couldn't make anything out. But it was over in an instant, leaving Naruto with an aching shoulder. Wah, what the hell just happened? He asked after falling to the ground. Shunshin no jutsu. Kisame replied simply, turning to a set of double doors and knocking. Come in, called Deva's voice. Naruto looked up, realizing in surprise that at the top of the building, on the floor where he'd first properly met Deva. Wow, Shunshin no jutsu is pretty incredible, he thought as he got to his feet. Kisame opened the door and walked in with Naruto close behind. In the room, Deva was standing inside, leaning against the wall just next to the opening with his arms folded. He looked at Kisame and Naruto expressionlessly, but took notice of the headband Naruto now wore. So you think Naruto-san has earned his place? He asked, looking Kisame in the eyes. He has proven himself to have the potential. Kisame replied, grinning, to that end, I'd like to make a request. Go on. I would like to take Naruto-san on a little training trip. Kisame explained, AIM doesn't quite provide that right environment for what I have in mind. A training trip, Naruto repeated, looking up at Kisame with wide eyes. And what would that be? Deva asked. The idea of Naruto leaving Aimgakure so soon wasn't something he would have planned on. But Kisame's only reply was a wider grin. Very well, but he must return within 1.5 months. We have need of him. Wait a minute, you're giving me a mission. Naruto asked excitedly. He had only just been acknowledged as a shinobi, and he was already getting missions and training. Yes, but I must warn you, no genin has ever been given a mission like this. Deva replied. He paused for a moment before nodding. In fact, this training trip might just be what you need. Very well, do as you must. But do not take it too far. We need Naruto-san in fighting condition by the time he returns. So we have 4 weeks, huh? Kisame thought aloud. Looks like it'll need to be a crash course for now. That's fine, I'll see what I can do. Deva nodded as Kisame turned away. But before leaving, he looked down at Naruto. Gather some gear, he said as he opened the door and walked away. Naruto watched as he left before turning back to Deva. He had a strange feeling he wasn't to leave yet. Deva turned around and stepped through the window and stood on the tongue of the sculpture. Naruto followed, standing next to him. A faint breeze blew through Deva's cloak, and his hair was cast to the right, gently drifting along. Naruto looked at him. He was giving off a seriously cool vibe at the moment. Deva looked down at Naruto expressionlessly, but at the same time not stoic. It appears you have met my partner, he stated. Naruto blinked, taken aback by this sudden mention. Deva took this as confirmation, looking ahead once more. Conan and I have known each other for most of our lives. In fact, she saved my life a long time ago. Naruto raised his brow. It was strange how strongly Conan reacted to what he had said, and yet Deva had no trouble speaking casually. You see, both of my parents were killed during the Second Great Shinobi War. Deva continued. They were both murdered by Konoha shinobi. He looked at Naruto again. His mouth was hanging open. They then left with insincere apologies. As a result, I was forced to leave what had been my home and fend for myself. I was left with only a single companion, our family dig, Chibai. Naruto lowered his gaze, looking down to the village below. Konoha shinobi had done that. He couldn't believe it. He had always been taught that Konoha sought peace above all else. How could that be true? Deva lowered himself to a sitting position, his left leg hanging over the edge of the tongue. Naruto looked down at him. He had such a distant look in his eyes. So you see, Konoha has a habit of inflicting pain upon others, he said, his hand just below his mouth as his arm rested on his knee. They try to hide it, but Konoha is the most corrupt of all the 5 great countries. He closed his eyes as his face became deeply contemplative. Naruto took a seat next to him, letting both his legs hang over the edge. After a moment, Deva opened his eyes once more and looked up at the sky. Konoha prospers from the trade it has with every other country, he said, in a tone that suggested he had thought about it often. It is also the first country that will be turned to for help because of its position. That means that despite its facade, Konoha benefits greatly from the conflicts of other nations. It thrives from war and seeks it out. It creates the very people who will seek to destroy it, because that is the way of the people there. If you were to ask me, I could give you the names of at least 6 people who were created by Konoha and soon gained the desire to see it fall. It is a place that hides its true, cruel nature, but I'm sure I don't have to tell you that. Naruto dropped his gaze. Deva was right, he really did know how the people of Konoha could be. They looked at each other with smiles, but whenever Naruto tried to do the same, he was met only with contempt and even hatred. It hurt that no one had wanted to see the real him, they only saw what lay inside of him. Was that what it meant to be from Konoha? That in the end they all hid their true selves behind a warm and caring pretense. It certainly seemed that way to Naruto. It actually made sense now that he thought about it. Konoha had killed Deva's parents. Why would that be hard to believe? Whether it was intentional or not, why would it even matter to them? They were at war, the only thing they would care about was how they could keep themselves alive, right? Why was I so determined to have them acknowledge me? He muttered, thinking aloud. Deva looked at him, the faint traces of a smile on his lips. It is not uncommon to seek to change the way people see you. He replied, but it is a foolish goal. Do not work for the sake of the opinions of others. Instead, work to change your opinion of yourself. If you believe you have changed into someone you want to be, then it doesn't really matter what the fools who look down upon you think. Although, there is always the chance that they will see you as you see yourself by the time you are satisfied with who you are. Naruto looked up at Deva in surprise. He couldn't wrap his head around how someone could seem so stoic, yet somehow charismatic at the same time. Deva leant in a little, looking Naruto dead in the eye. Surpass Konoha, make them see that you are beyond what they can ever hope to become. He said with a slight glint in his eyes, and if they still refuse to acknowledge them, show them your power firsthand. Naruto stared at Deva with wide eyes. Those words were certainly inspirational, and Naruto was hit with a drive he had never known before. Okay, he said, grinning and nodding. He clambered to his feet and ran from the room, throwing the door open as he left. Deva watched him disappear. The moment he was gone, the glint faded away and his small smile fell. He returned to observing the village, his thoughts on the near future. Naruto ran down the staircase to the next floor and barreled through the door. He saw Ayumu leaning outside his door, looking up at Naruto in surprise. Hey! Ayumu called, jerking his thumb towards the door. The guys are just taking a break. You need to get something. Naruto nodded, walking over to Ayumu, who opened the door for him. Inside, the floor, bed, wardrobe, and trunk were each covered in white sheets. They had also all been moved into the middle of the room, so the decorators could have room to reach the walls. The rest of the team couldn't make it, so I'm afraid this is gonna take a little longer than expected. Ayumu explained with an apologetic smile, I'm sorry about this, we should really be done in here by now. The walls were covered in fresh paint, a warm shade of pale orange. The wall on the window side was almost done, and the one with the door to the kitchen was untouched. The place was certainly a lot more cramped with all the furniture in the middle of the room. As soon as the walls are finished, we'll get to work moving the carpet in. Ayumu continued, as he led Naruto around to the untouched wall. Then we'll get started on the kitchen. It's looking great so far. Naruto smiled, looking around with a wondrous expression. Don't worry about the time, though. I'm gonna be gone for a few weeks, so there's no rush. Really, that's a relief, Ayumu said with a look that proved it. Naruto headed round to his wardrobe and opened it up, grinning broadly. That kid is sure taking his time. Kasame muttered as he glanced at the stairwell again. It had been about 20 minutes since he'd left Naruto with the leader. Was he still with him? What on earth could they be talking about that was taking so long? Annoyed, Kasame headed outside. Maybe some fresh air would help keep his cool. He paced around outside. They had only 4 weeks to do what he intended. There was no time to dawdle. If it weren't for the fact he had a brain, he'd go up there and tell leader to hurry up so he could leave. As it was, he had little choice. You waiting for someone, Kasame-sensei? Kasame looked up, his brow raised. Naruto stood above the entrance, his arms folded and a confident smirk on his lips. He wore a crimson cloak with an intricate pattern that reminded Kasame of the sea or maybe chakra. It was very different from the cloak Kasame wore. It ended at the knees instead of the shins. It also had sleeves that fit comfortably, rather than the loose and wide ones Kasame had. Another thing was that Naruto wore his cloak with the buttons undone, allowing it to billow in the wind. His collar also reached up to points, instead of meeting with a symmetrical line. When worn with the slashed aim headband and that confident expression, Naruto looked like he had years more experience than he actually did. Kasame grinned broadly at his student. He certainly had the look down. Not bad, squirt, he said, but there's something missing. Huh, what is it? Naruto asked, his confident look disappearing. Kasame's eyes flashed as he jerked his head, signaling for Naruto to follow. "Come on," he said, "I'll show you." "Have you ever heard of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist?" Kasame asked as he and Naruto walked through a dark and wet cave. Water dripped from stalactites, landing in puddles on the ground. By expectation, the place ought to have been freezing. But in actual fact, it was pretty warm and well lit also. That was due to the strange crystals which grew in mounds along the walls and across the ground, lighting up the cave with a pale blue light and exuding a gentle warmth. Naruto had almost reached out to touch one of them, but Kasame warned him against it. The place really should have been freezing cold. The temperature of the crystals was much greater up close. It was strange how something could look so pretty, yet be so dangerous. Naruto looked up at Kasame questioningly. 7 ninja swordsmen. He repeated, "Nope, can't say I have." Kasame smirked, as if he expected that answer. He and Naruto stepped through an opening that led to a descending passage. Everything around them suggested this place was natural. There were no signs that anyone had ever actually been here before. Although, the small amount of water running across the floor would probably have washed away any signs of life that had been here. Kasame had advised Naruto to watch his step. It was very slippery in here, and one false move could result in death. "I was once a member of that group," Kasame explained, a distant look in his eyes. "We were known as the strongest blade-wielding shinobi born of Kirigakure. However, that legend wasn't strictly true. You see, no one who joined the 7 swordsmen originally wielded the blades that gave them their name. It was the duty of the most powerful member to decide who could become a part of the organization, and to give anyone he selects their blade. That way, it was absolute that there would be only 7 members. They reached a fork in the tunnels, the left leading to a deeper and darker descent, and the right leading to a lighter, more level path. Kasame tapped Naruto on the arm, gesturing to the right-hand path. They made their way through to that direction, where there were a considerable amount of crystals growing. There was scarcely a shadow in the entire corridor. And so, it was I who was left to decide who was worthy of joining our organization, and which blade they were worthy of. Kasame continued, "I took the greatest blade, Samehada, for myself. There were 6 others with which were to be given to the other members. That was the way things stayed, until I grew bored of the others and their timid ways. So I left, and they seemed to adopt the method of taking on apprentices. Heh heh, fools." Naruto looked up at Kasame, wondering why he was telling him all this. What did it have to do with what they were doing now? And was that massive object on his back the same hata he mentioned? How the hell was that a sword? Its shape was nothing like a blade. Kasame suddenly grinned with a nostalgic look on his face. "There was one person, the last man to become a member before I left," he said, his eyes fixed on a point, yet at the same time distant. "His name was Mamachi Zabuza, the demon of the hidden mist. He broke into the final graduation exam and killed all 100 of the graduates. He himself was still but an academy student." Naruto's eyes were wide with shock. A single academy student taking out 100 would-be genin. It didn't seem possible, surely only a cage was that strong. But he knew Kasame wasn't deceiving him, there was no reason for him to. "Naturally, I kept an eye on him." Kasame continued, "And when he reached the rank of Jonin, which was quite a short time, I extended the invitation to him. He was interested in becoming stronger and so accepted without complaint. However, he did have an issue with the blade I had decided to give him." He seemed to leave his story hanging there as they progressed through the cave. It was a bit annoying. Naruto had been drawn in and wanted to know what had happened next. But Kasame seemed more interested in what lay ahead than continuing his anecdote. Naruto turned his head back to looking where he was going. It looked like the rest was going to come later. They left the passage and walked into a large cavern where the crystals were now plentiful. They brew along the walls, floor, and even the ceiling, offering their faint light from every angle. But the light they cast was dim compared to what was before them. A huge mass of crystals, literally filling the far side of the room. They started on the ground and steadily grew upward, each varying in size from very small to incredibly large, until they ended near the ceiling. The mass was shaped oddly, with large and small indents placed neatly amongst the glowing gems, as if they had been carved out long ago. They were positioned in a rising pattern, one in the center and close to the top of the mass, with 3 on either side steadily descending. Also, as each indent grew nearer to the ground, they also became smaller. From what Naruto could see, they were all empty, their purpose wasn't clear. But one thing was certain. He was completely awestruck. "What is this place?" he asked as he surveyed the enthralling glow before him. It has no name. Kasame replied, looking at the crystals nostalgically. I found this place completely by chance when a heavy storm rolled in and I was separated from my team. I took a look around and found this place. He reached behind him and gripped the handle of the object on his back, lifting it and holding it out before him as though it were weightless. You see how Samehada is acting? He asked. Samehada, as it was now confirmed to be, was vibrating lightly in Kasame's grip, and there was a faint sound in the air like an animalistic giggle. Jiggy. Do you see how it resonates with this place? Kasame asked, surveying Samehada with an almost soft look in his eyes. This is where it was born, a broadsword infused with its own chakra. Samehada continued its high-pitched chittering, as if excited to be in this place. Kasame returned it to his back and took a few steps forward with Naruto beside him. They stood in front of the mass, and now Naruto understood what Kasame had meant by the heat. It was immense, just being there was making him sweat. But the light of the crystals was drawing him in, he could hardly tear himself away. Kasame looked at each indent nostalgically. As I was saying, Zabuza-san didn't agree with the blade I gave him. He said, he took one look at it and actually said to me, a demon is more terrifying than a monster, and he sought out a blade of his preference. He was actually quite entertaining, which is why I allowed him to live. But as a result, Kasame left his words trailing and walked off to the left of the mass, heading for the last indent on that side. Naruto blinked before following him. They both stopped in front of it, Kasame looking at the gap while Naruto looked at Kasame. There can only be 7, Kasame said, his eyes fixed on a point, and here lies the 7th. Naruto slowly turned his head, his eyes widening at what he saw. Deep in the crystals lay a katana like none he had ever seen before. It was encased in a crimson sheath, shining like it was brand new. The hilt was wrapped in a red cloth, a small line of which hung off the end loosely. Overall, it had no special traits about it in itself, other than the unreal quality it was kept in. But what made it so captivating was the strange red aura that surrounded it, like mist or smoke. It lay among the blue crystals, which had begun growing around it, trying to draw it in for themselves. Naruto was hit with powerful urge to take it in his hand, but he resisted, for Kasame's eyes were still upon it. Ekakiten. He said in a low voice, that is its name. It truly is a sight, isn't it? Yeah, Naruto breathed, not even aware that he'd forgotten to blink. Kasame looked at him, a grin spreading across his face. Take it. Naruto looked up at Kasame in surprise. Kasame looked back at him with his eyes wide, a slightly urging look on his face. Naruto turned back to the katana, uncertain if he had heard right. You want me to take it? He asked as he was drawn in by the mesmerizing power of the Ekakite. The 7 swordsmen are no more, and no one else knows the location of this place. Kasame replied, his expression maintained, if you do not then no one will. Naruto blinked several times as his eyes suddenly felt dry. The blade lay before him in an almost dormant state. The red mist from the hilt raised into the air, curling around an invisible hand. It was so enticing, Naruto anted nothing more than to hold it, to wield it. Slowly, feeling as though he was taking part in a ceremony, Naruto reached out for the sheath, moving his hands through the searing crystals. They burned, but not enough to make him pull back. He stretched his fingers out and touched the sheath. It was surprisingly cool, considering the surrounding heat. The mist moved away from his hand, as if being repelled by it. He gripped the sheath with his fingers, doing his best to keep from touching the crystals, and slowly raised it. The moment it was removed from its bed, the red mist faded away, and all that there was Naruto and Ekakite. Are you freaking kidding me? Naruto blinked, looking around rapidly for the person that had spoken. But there was no one there, no one who fitted that voice anyway. It had sounded like a young man's and had the smallest tone of an echo following it. Naruto slowly drew his eyes back to the katana in his hand, a stunned look on his face. I would have thought you would be glad for someone to wield you, Iko-kun. Kasame said, grinning broadly. Oh, come on, Kasame, no Dana. Everyone else got a strong wielder. How come I get this pipsqueak? Naruto was too dazed to even acknowledge the insult. The sword was talking. Kasame let out a small laugh, shaking his head. Always impertinent. He grinned. I think you two will get along fine. Come on, Dana, I'm begging you here. That's enough, Iko-kun. Kasame replied, turning away. I'm afraid it's Uzumaki Naruto or no one. Naruto couldn't be certain, but he was sure he felt the katana tense up. Or rather, it felt a little lighter in his hand, as if Kasame's words had caused it shock. Did you say Uzumaki? Naruto blinked, his mind coming back to the real world. He suddenly felt like he was being surveyed, even though no eyes were upon him. It made him a little uneasy, but it soon faded away as if the proverbial eyes looked away. Fine, let's go. Naruto raised his brow. That was a surprisingly quick change of heart. But he was still too confused to say anything about it. He just followed Kasame dumbly. He didn't take his eyes off Ekaketon, he couldn't. He kept watching it even as they left the cavern and ascended through the passage. He barely noticed as the light around him dimmed due to the number of crystals reducing. But he did get a strange feeling. It was like a series of rapid pulses coming from the katana, almost like it was agitated. Would you quit staring at me? Oh, sorry, Naruto replied, looking up at Kasame's back. This was almost too unbelievable. Could this actually be real? He had in his hands a living, talking sword. He had to wonder if this was another effect of the crystals. Was he being intoxicated? They reached level ground, and the last of the crystals were left behind. Now the only source of light was the opening, far ahead. Naruto hurried to catch up with Kasame, who was a few meters ahead. When he was walking next to him, he kept a steady pace, his eyes fixed on the exit. Kasame looked down at him bemusedly, looking between his student and the Ekaketon. He then returned his gaze to the opening with a settled look on his face. They left the cave, walking out into green grass and gray skies. They stood on an outcrop of land, attached to the mainland by an extension of the mountain that stood behind them. A lake almost completely surrounded the area, leading out into forests in every direction. Kasame looked around, casting his eyes across the large mound of rocks behind them and then up at the sky. His brow furrowed slightly and he sighed, dropping his gaze. We lost a week just getting here, he said as he began walking towards the water. That means it will take a week to get back. That limits our training to just 2 weeks. We'll have to get to move fast if you two are to work together. Kasame no Dana. Naruto-kun is the one who released you. He is the one who wields you. Kasame interrupted without looking back. Naruto stared at Kasame with a raised brow. When did it change to Naruto-kun? It's not that. I've been asleep for so long I'm a little rusty. Kasame looked back, a mad grin on his lips. Well then, perhaps Samehada can beat you back into shape, he said as he gripped his blade. Wa Samehada, are you serious? Naruto blinked in surprise as the Ekaketon suddenly jolted in his hand. Come on, Naruto, let's do this. Okay. Naruto replied as he pushed the sheath through his belt strap. He then gripped the hilt in his right hand and clumsily withdrew the blade. He held it in the air, surveying it in the light. The metal appeared untouched, it shone in the sunlight. Naruto found himself awestruck again. Yeah, you're pretty too. Naruto exclaimed, staring at the blade bewilderedly. Kasame chuckled as he brought Samehada out. All right then, let's see what we have to work with, he said as he took a stance with his feet spread apart. Naruto blinked before doing the same, holding Ekaketon in both hands. He wasn't really sure what he'd gotten himself into, but when he was against an opponent with a sword that big, his every instinct told him to run. Kasame didn't give him that chance, however, as he leapt through the air and brought Samehada down on Naruto's head. Hey, hold on, Naruto cried as he raised Ekaketon to defend himself. His eyes widened in surprise as the two blades connected. Instead of resisting the attack, as he was trying to do, he felt his arms lower as the Samehada did. Then with the momentum of the attack, he spun around on the water at an incredible speed. In an instant, the Ekaketon's edge was almost touching Kasame's neck. Rusty, did you say? Kasame asked, grinning. Sounds like you wanted this fight. I'll be the greatest of the 7. I will defeat Samehada. Naruto had a stunned look on his face. He was a little dizzy from the move. He had done none of that. Did that mean Ekaketon had control of his body? Kasame chuckled again, shaking his head lightly. Naruto didn't know what was so funny, but he certainly felt nervous. As expected, you never pay full attention to your surroundings, Kasame said. There was silence for several seconds before Ekaketon grunted in annoyance. Naruto looked around and saw the reason. Samehada was almost touching his right arm, the edge running from his shoulder to elbow. His eyes widened in shock. What sort of fight was this? I can shred Naruto-kun's arm apart in an instant, but an attack like that won't kill me, Kasame said in an almost taunting tone. I doubt you could move so swiftly with a dying wielder, could you? Ekaketon lowered itself, dropping to Naruto's side. Kasame's grin broadened and he did the same, replacing Samehada on his back. It looks like you have no skill with wielding a sword, Kasame said, looking at Naruto. Then he turned his gaze to Ekaketon, and you seem almost incapable of cooperating with your wielder. He turned away and walked to shore, his grin maintained. Naruto blinked before trying to put the blade back in its sheath. It wasn't an easy task. Oh, for crying out loud. Naruto's wrist twitched slightly as Ekakiten sheathed itself. Naruto gave it an apologetic grin before hurrying after Kasame. That night, Naruto and Kasame sat around a campfire, eating some sort of meat skewered on a stick. The sky was clear, and every star could be seen at least through the leaves. It was a quiet night. There weren't even the sounds of wildlife, just the crackling of the fire and the sound of Kasame tearing chunks of meat in his teeth. Naruto took his time with his meal. He was too deep in thought. Ekakiten was laid against the tree beside him and was being strangely silent. Kasame glanced up at Naruto, smirking at his contemplative look. "Deep thought doesn't really suit you," he said as he ripped the last of his meat off the stick. Naruto blinked, looking up at his sensei. "Oh, sorry," he replied before looking back down to the fire. Kasame sighed before sitting back against his tree. "A word of warning so you don't make a fool of yourself," he said as he closed his eyes. "Only someone who wields one of the 7 blades can hear them, no one else." Naruto didn't react to this. It didn't really seem like that big a deal to him. He rested his head against the bark, looking up at the stars. It was strange, but he could feel Ekakiten's presence. It was like he knew it was there without a doubt. "Guess we're partners now." Naruto raised his brow, looking down at the blade. It was strange. Although it stayed inanimate, Naruto almost felt like it was another person, and could sort of see the stance, the mood, even tell what direction it was looking in. Right now, it seemed determined to keep its attention away from Naruto, fixing itself on something deep in the forest. "Yeah, I guess," Naruto replied. "Is that okay?" "Guess it's better than nothing. Everyone's gotta start from the bottom, right?" Naruto grinned, and he was sure that if Ekakiten had a mouth, he'd be smirking. "Don't worry, I promise I'll do everything I can to get strong as fast as possible," Naruto said with an excited look. "I'm gonna be the greatest Hawk." He suddenly fell silent, dropping his gaze. He was about to say that he wanted to become Hawkage. Was that thought still in his mind? He was sure it was gone by now, but he just blurted it out like it was never gone. To be Hawkage, was that still his dream? Even after all that had happened, was that still what he wanted? Ekakiten noticed Naruto's change in attitude and was watching him curiously. "Something wrong?" "Oh, it's nothing," Naruto muttered, "just thinking about stuff." "Look, I'm not gonna be partnered with a guy that's melancholy all the time, so you might as well spit it out." Naruto glanced at Ekakiten from the corner of his eye. It felt like it was fixed on him, giving him a hard stare. He averted his gaze again, staring at his feet. "I was born in Konohagakure," he said in a quiet but clear voice. "When I was born, the Yondaime Hokage sealed the Kyuubi no Yoko inside of me. It had attacked the village and killed a lot of people. Because of that, the villagers all hated me. At least, that's what Mizuki-san told me, but I wanted to change their minds, to show them I wasn't a failure. I wanted to become Hokage, so everyone would respect me, but I guess that's not happening, is it?" Ekakiten was silent, listening intently to Naruto's words. When he finished speaking, the blade maintained a steady silence for several moments. "So, the Hokage, like the strongest in your village?" Naruto nodded slowly, glad that Kasame was asleep. "So what you were saying was that you wanna be the greatest Hokage, that right?" "Well, yeah," Naruto replied. "That's lame." Naruto blinked in surprise, looking at the blade once more. "Lame? How was that lame? Why are you settling for just Hokage? The world's bigger than just one small village." "What are you saying?" Naruto asked, leaning on his hand towards Ekakiten. He heard the blade sigh irritably, which was strange considering it didn't breath. "I'm gonna be known as the strongest blade in the world. For that to happen, I'll need the strongest wielder in the world. That's simple enough for you." Naruto stared at Ekakiten with a raised brow. For a sword, it was very ambitious. "You want people to respect you, right? Why not have the whole world respect you?" "The whole world," Naruto repeated in a hushed tone. That was certainly a step up from just one village, but did he really need that much recognition? He only wanted the people who had looked down upon him to see him differently, not have worldwide renown. But it was tempting. "So, the strongest ninja and the strongest sword, is that what you mean?" "Yeah, so what do you say?" Naruto looked up at the sky, a dazed expression on his face. The world was a big place. Could he really be known by everyone in it? To have everyone say his name, not in fear and hate, but awe and respect. Now that was something. He looked back down at Ekakiten, who waited in anticipation for his answer. "All right then," Naruto replied as a grin spread across his lips. "Let's do it." Attaboy. Across the fire, Kisame watched them with a single open eye. As he watched the two of them grinning, he did so as well. He had a feeling those two would get along. A tall figure, a man, descended the spiraling stairs of the tower, heading below ground level towards the sub-basement. He bowed his head as he walked through the door and into a tunnel system beneath the building, which looked very much like it would in a hospital. Paved floors and tiled walls greeted him, the pale blue lights shining along the walls. Wires ran across the ceiling, pipes did as well. The corridor was cold, but the air was clear. Ventilation in this place was always decent, it had to be. He walked through the corridor, his heavy footsteps echoing throughout. This man had a beyond peculiar appearance. His head was bald, and he had a neck that appeared to be thicker than his head. His jaw was of peculiar size, and he was constantly smiling, with an unusually wide mouth. But those were the most normal things about his appearance. On either side of his face, he actually had in place of ears, two more faces. They were identical to the first, except that one was angry and the other was expressionless. He also had 6 spikes stalking out of his bald head with a slashed-aim headband just below. On his face, he had 2 studs on either cheek, with a particularly large one on his chin. And through his nose, there was a vertical ring. All the piercings were made of black material, just like 2 others before him. And just like those others, his eyes were gray, with several black circles surrounding the pupil. With those eyes, he looked into a room to his left through the glass pane in the door. He stopped and walked in, smiling down at what he saw. On a metal bed with a pale cloth covering most of his body lay the dead Uchiha Madara. The man walked over to him, looking down at the pale face before him. He reached out and pulled back the Uchiha's eyelid, surveying what lay underneath. "Perhaps you can be of use after all," the man said before reaching up to his right eye. "That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share, and do comments."